Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe. This is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Six o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you. It is time to rise and shine, and that's the name of the program as well. Yep, you are tuned to Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective, broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, streaming on the internet, www.channelafrica.co.za, and you can also catch us on your mobiles. Just go to the App Store, look for SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and then look for Channel Africa, and of course Rise and Shine. My name is Peter Ndoro. Good morning, Asanda Beda. Welcome back.
Good morning. It's good to be back. Happy Tuesday.
Can you believe it's December, my friend?
Happy December.
Oish, I tell you.
Happy New Week. The festive cheer is in the air. I don't know if you're
goodness.
feeling it, but I'm feeling it.
I think I am. I think I'm starting to feel it now. Yeah.
Which is good. And today we're not matching. I don't know how that happened.
No, I'm wearing my
I went
Manchester
green, you went
United red.
All right. Well, that's coming up in the show. Of course, we're together for the next 3 hours. And thank you so much for tuning in to Rise and Shine. We'll be looking at Russia looking to establish diplomatic and economic ties in Africa by opening an official embassy in Moroni in the Comoros. And then Uganda held their first televised presidential debate. As we know, they're going to be heading to the polls on the 15th of January 2026 to vote 5 opposition candidates in that debate, Bobby Wine being one of them. But the incumbent president, Yoweri Museveni, was not in that debate. So lots of stories coming up, and we'll be discussing them on Rise and Shine. At Channel Africa 1 is where you can connect with us. That's via our different social media platforms. We'd love to hear your questions or comments about our programming. Let's start with our news update. For the first time this morning on Tuesday, we say good morning to Onele Nzinzi, and following her is Musubudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. Survivors who fled the fall of al-Fashir in Sudan's Darfur region have given harrowing accounts of abuses by the paramilitary rapid support forces. People now sheltering in a camp in the army-controlled territory in northern Sudan said they witnessed mass killings, sexual violence and detentions for ransom. Muhammad Abake Adam worked at the Zamzam camp for displaced people and fled when the RSF advanced.
They shot some people directly in front of us. Then they carried them and threw them far away. And on the road, we saw dead bodies out in the open. They would take a woman behind a tree or take her far from us, out of sight, so you wouldn't see with your own eyes. But you would hear her shout, "Help me, help me." And she would come and say,
Guinea-Bissau military rulers have banned protests and strikes. This as they tighten control ahead of a high-level visit by West Africa's ECOWAS bloc that is seeking to restore constitutional order following last week's coup. The military government says strikes and activities regarded as threat to peace and stability were prohibited. Their directive also ordered public institutions, ministries and state secretariats to reopen and resume operations. The announcement follows protests in Bissau on Saturday, where hundreds, primarily youths, demanded the release of detained opposition leader and the publication of presidential election results. The mediation team from the Economic Community of West African States comprises of President of Togo, Cape Verde and Senegal, along with the ECOWAS Commission President. The state, supported by South Africa's Democratic Alliance Party, has called for former President Jacob Zuma's application to appeal the repayment order to be dismissed. This comes as the High Court in Pretoria hears Zuma's case to appeal a court order requiring him to repay the $1.6 million in state-funded legal fees. They related to his criminal and civil cases. The state says the payments were unlawful, and because Zuma personally benefited, he must reimburse the money to uphold the rule of law. The DA had previously asked that his pension be attached if he cannot pay. The state's legal representative, Advocate George Avacomides, told the court that simply declaring the payment invalid is not enough.
Our learned friend argued that someone else was to blame, and innocently Mr. Zuma was the recipient and the beneficiary of other people's decisions. That may factually be true, but it's not before your law. Unfortunately, that is not how the principle of legality works. That is not how the rule of law works. And in fact, if you disregard the provisions of the Constitution, this is precisely what happens.
Lastly, a Kenyan mother is demanding answers about her son who went missing after being lured to Russia for a security guard job, only to end up in a war in Ukraine. Susan Koloba said she'd last heard from her son in early October when he sent warnings he was being deployed on a high-risk mission. She says a recruiting agent later said he had died and offered her $100,000 in compensation.
He sent me a photo. He was dressed in a combat uniform. I asked him, "Are you sure this is the job you went to do?" He told me, "Mom, what could I have done? The job we were told we came to do has been changed." After a few days, he told me they had been ambushed.
Channel Africa News, I am Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, the Bafana team to go to the Africa Cup of Nations tournament has been announced, while Tottenham Hotspur boss Thomas Frank is confident of the owner's backing. Details of these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Every day after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you what we call the Africa Roundup. And this is an opportunity for us to catch you up with the top stories and events and news items that took place in the last 24 hours. And we do this with our team of journalists, correspondents and analysts that put all of those stories into context for you and pretty much sets you up for the news day ahead. So let's start today's Africa Roundup with news from West Africa, where newly arrived refugee families in the Chadian border town of Tine, fleeing violence from Al-Fasher in Sudan, are facing severe shortages of food and water. International aid is scarce, leaving them dependent on donations from other refugees, many of whom arrived only weeks earlier. Emma Jetle reports.
Najwa Isa Adam is one of the volunteers, a recent refugee herself.
We're living off the charity from people in Tine, as well as people from Sudan.
Adam buys and prepares food for newly arriving refugee families, using money donated by other refugees living in Tine.
Youth here participate with me in helping people. We are around 6 or 7 people, and we want to help our brothers.
There is little international humanitarian aid available to families arriving at the border town. Of the handful of NGOs working in Tine, none provide durable shelter, not even tents, only plastic tarps. Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, runs a clinic in the camp. It says about 1 in 4 children are malnourished. and that the situation is getting worse with families fleeing Al Fasher.
The head of the UN Peace Operations Department, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, was in Algeria on Monday to attend the 12th high-level seminar on peace and security in Africa. In a tweet, he welcomed Algeria's role on the UN Security Council and praised its ongoing support for peace operations.
Prior to the visit, Mr. Lacroix wrapped up a 4-day visit to the Central African Republic. He said the country is following a positive trajectory with significant progress achieved, giving credit first and foremost to the Central African Republic and its people. During the visit, Mr. Lacroix had meetings with the President of the Central African Republic, the Prime Minister, and other senior government authorities, women's organizations, civil society groups, and the diplomatic community. With the election scheduled for the end of the month, Mr. Lacroix reaffirmed that the peacekeeping mission remains fully committed to supporting the organization of the polls so they can take place under the best possible conditions.
Now, the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO, says that it's assisted the Congolese army in screening about 9,500 people hoping to join the armed forces. The process took place at the Kamina Military Training Center in Haute-Lomanie.
This took place 27th and 28th of November, and we can tell you that because of this screening, 25 boys under the age of 18 were identified and separated because before they were formally inducted. These efforts were first put out as a part of action plan signed by 2012 by the government of the DRC with the UN to end recruitment and use of children in the country's armed forces. The Congolese armed forces completed measures, including in the action plan in 2017. These ongoing screenings to prevent children recruitment reflects a constructive collaboration between the government, the peacekeeping missions, Child Protection Section, UNICEF, and the joint technical team working group on children in armed conflict in the area of security sector reform.
An Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo is now over, health officials and the UN's World Health Organization said on Monday. The country has gone 42 consecutive days without recording a new case. DRC's Health Minister, Dr. Roger Mulamba, has more.
I officially declare the end of the 16th Ebola epidemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Thanks to rapid and coordinated mobilization, we were able to contain the spread of the virus and protect the population. With a final total of 53 confirmed cases, 11 probable cases, 34 deaths, and 19 recoveries spread across 6 health areas.
Now, South Africa's Crime Investigation Unit, the Hawks, says that it could make more arrests over the alleged recruitment of South Africans to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war. 5 people appeared in the Kempton Park Magistrates Court, and that's just north of Johannesburg, on Monday. They're accused of breaking the regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act and were arrested over the weekend whilst travelling to Russia. The case has been postponed to next week, and the Hawks spokesperson is Katlego Mukhale.
Members of OR Tambo SAPS noticed suspicious people who were at a boarding gate, and they managed to contain them, which followed an interview. During that interview, it was amassed that these people were allegedly on their way to Russia, wherein it is purported that they will be part of the war that's going on there. What is important is that for one to be able to go fight a war that is not with their own country, there is certain processes that need to be followed, and those were not followed.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us because we're going to do a deep dive on some of the stories that have been making headlines in East Africa with our local commentator there, Dennis Beru. And Sandra will be chatting to him.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The US is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
15 minutes past 6 Central African time. Let's dive deeper now into stories making headlines in the East African region of our continent. And we speak to journalist and team lead at Grassroots Journalism Kenya to help us unpack some of these stories, Dennis Beru. Dennis, how are you on this Tuesday?
Thank you so much, Asanda. I'm pretty well. Hope you are good.
Well, thank you so much. All right, today we start with Russia. They want to establish ties in the African continent by opening officially an embassy, and this will be in the Comoros.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Of course, Comoros is the latest wave of Russia effort to expand its presence in Africa. And of course, in the recent years, Moscow has already reopened embassies in Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, and at the end of 2025, he's also planning new diplomatic mission in Niger, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Togo, and Liberia. And according to the Russian Foreign Affairs Minister, Sergei Lavrov, of course, the Africa's increasing influence in global politics makes it a priority for Moscow, and the new Comoros embassy forms part of the Kremlin broader Africa strategy. Of course, the strategy reflects Russia's broader goal of deepening bilateral ties, increasing trade, and of course, investment, and of course, boosting security cooperation with African nations. And of course, for the Comoros, which is a very tiny country in the Indian Ocean, of course, hosting a Russian embassy could provide an access to the new trade, investment, security, and of course opportunities. Of course, given that Moscow has a foothold in its strategically important to the Indian Ocean. Of course, Asanda, now the analysts suggest that the move is part of Russia's longer-term plan to expand the influence in Africa through the combination of soft power, infrastructure projects, and political partnerships.
So, of course, Russia wanting to establish these ties economically and diplomatically, they will be benefiting. But what does Africa stand to benefit here besides less reliance on Western economies?
Of course, recently we've seen most African countries are leaning towards the side of Russia, and of course, Comoros, as I said, a very tiny country in the Indian Ocean. Of course, they'll be looking at benefiting in terms of course, boosting trade between Russia and Comoros, and of course, we are looking at the tourism sector. Of course, Comoros is one of the country with the best, coastal beaches, across the world. Of course, they'll be relying on the tourism attraction from or tourists from Russia. And of course, when it comes to in terms of infrastructure development, of course, Russia is one of the countries, with good infrastructure strategies, and of course, these will be part of the benefit that Comoros will be benefiting, because the the efforts is around ensuring that, of course, we have the bilateral a partnership between the two countries, and of course, we might see that slight improvement in terms of infrastructure in Comoro.
All right, let's move to your home country now, Kenya. The president there, William Ruto, has made major announcements on appointments into several government and state-owned entities. What can you tell us here?
Yeah, of course, William Ruto, of course, alongside several cabinet secretaries, they have announced a significant appointment and, of course, a reappointment to top positions within various government agencies, universities, and, of course, regulatory bodies. Of course, these changes outlined in the Kenyan Gazette published on November 28th, 2025, of course, a span range of sectors, and of course, among the most significant additions, Ruto reappointed Winfrida Angumi as non-executive chairperson of the Kenya National Highways Authority. Of course, this is one of the powerful road or highway authorities in Kenya. And of course, Angumi's new term runs until November 2026. And of course, this followed the renewal of appointment and the powers granted by the Kenya Roads Authority. And of course, when you look at the transport sector, that is transport and road and transport cabinet secretary Davis Chirchir, of course, also made several key appointments. Of course, Joyce Nyambura, Mandura, and Kenneth Wando Odhiambo have been appointed to the Kenya Urban Roads Authority, that is Kura Board. And of course, while Geoffrey Kiprotich Koros joins Kenya Rural Roads Authority. And of course, Gloria Sarah Awinja has been reappointed to the board of the Kenya National Highways Authority, and Francis Theuri and Phyllis Wakiaga have been renewed the Kenya Roads Authority. And of course, Asanda, we've seen other changes in the education sector, including one of the government institutions, that is Tharaka University, Kaimosi Friends, Tomboya, Koitalera, Arap Samoe, Cabernet, among others. And of course, some of the notable appointments include Ruth Charity Wanyonyi, Edita Wambeti Njue, Emmanuel Bore Ngwetuni, and of course Duranira Timagu, who have been appointed to the Council of the Tharaka Nithi University, and of course they'll be serving on a 3-year term. And of course, Asanda, many might be wondering, why sudden, changes in the key government institution. Of course, I have seen better part of yesterday, key political commentators are commenting that, of course, this is just one of the ways to consolidate is presidency. Of course, remember, Kenya will be heading to polls in about 19 months.
Also in your country, an issue that's emerged that's not normally, or that's not popularized, it's not spoken about that much, is that PhD students in Kenya are struggling to find placements in the workplace. Is this signaling unemployment rates being an issue in Kenya, or is it more on the education system?
Of course, it's under this is all about no jobs in Kenya, and of course it is a crisis that Kenya is facing because Kenya has highly skilled PhD holders. Of course, once considered the backbone of the national research, innovation, and academia, and they are sitting at home jobless. Of course, for years. A doctorate was seen as ultimate ticket to secure respected careers. But of course, Asanda, when you see now that promise has faded, and universities once the main employer of the PhD graduates have frozen hiring due to the financial strain, and of course, declining student enrollment. And of course, government agencies are also recruiting less. And of course, we are looking at, leaving thousands of highly trained scholars fighting for the handful of positions. And of course, Kenya, which is now producing, the PhDs for the purpose of a job market can absorb. Of course, we are not seeing this because most of the employers are afraid of hiring PhD holders, and of course, they would rather go for the diploma holders because they feel that this is the most skillful, group. And of course, we've had this conversation internally as a country because there's so many people with degrees, PhD holders who have no jobs, and they resort to working for casual jobs. And of course, 2 days ago, the Minister for the Education, of course, said that, of course, once you've completed your education, go start business. And which is really for me and other people, this was not a right statement for the cabinet minister for education to say that.
Definitely not words of encouragement there, because what does it mean then, I guess, for the way we traditionally view education, not just for Kenyans, but I mean in African cultures, there's so much emphasis that we place on the more education you have and the higher the education levels that you've achieved, the better you'll be. But now it seems that that's going to change. What is the future of how we view education on our continent?
Yeah, of course, Asanda. Now we are going to view education differently because I remember when we were growing up, we were being told, you have to go to school, you have you have to do your degree, you have to do your PhD so that you can get a good job. But now it is now the opposite because what we are currently seeing in Kenya, and not only Kenya and across Africa, we are now wasting these brain powers because someone with a PhD holder, we should expect him or her to be or to have a good job so that, of course, those who are now coming up, who are now in school, can look up to them. But it is the opposite, and we might see education being considered. People will not consider education much, and we have seen actually some people resort to encouraging their kids and children to pursue their talents and not education.
Interesting times we live in, Dennis. Things have definitely changed and the future looks very different from what we've seen. Let's go to Uganda now. They, of course, are gearing for the 15th January elections 2026, and they held a televised presidential debate. What stood out for you on this one? 5 opposition members were on stage, and the President Yoweri Museveni was not there.
Yeah, Asanda, I had an opportunity to follow the debate, which included the presidential candidates Mugisha Muntu, Robert Changulanyi, also known as Bobby Wine, Nathan Dalana, Mafabi, Joseph Elton, Nabi Rizi, and Frank Burira Nabinga, who attended the 2025 NTV presidential a debate that was held at Rena Hotel in Kampala. And of course, the absence of the veteran politician Yoweri Museveni was visible. Of course, the campaign team confirmed that, of course, they received, the invitation from a nation media group, but 10 days earlier. But of course, the excuse was, being occupied to electoral commitment. And of course, the candidates who attended the debate, of course, they were now, accusing the current president, of course, for his leadership, the regime. And of course, we saw Bobby Wine, Changulanyi, of course, terming Museveni's absence because they were he is discussing the past when the country is discussing the future. And of course, they looked at, the economic growth, youth unemployment in Uganda, which of course triggered an immediate clash on the ideologies, of course, where we saw different presidential candidates, clashing the likes of Frank Burira Kabinga of the Revolutionary People's Party, of course, painted Uganda's economic problems as symptoms of a deeper political sickness. And of course, Sandam, we have, and they mentioned that, of course, we have more than 10 million young Ugandans who have no jobs. And of course, they were looking at, how can they transform the creative industry, tourism, and SME expansion. Of course, they also vowed to reduce the cost of the business, overhaul transport infrastructure, renegotiate unfair international agreements, among other things. And of course, now the absence of Yoweri Museveni, of course, people expected Museveni to participate in this debate, considering that is the main candidate for the January election.
Dennis, thank you so much. We'll leave it there for now, and have a great rest of the week and the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, and have a good one.
Thank you. Dennis Beru is journalist and team lead at Grassroots Journalism Kenya, our East African analyst in terms of stories making headlines there in this region of the continent. 6:30 Central African time it is. Let's say good morning to Onele Nsinzi. She has our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Sanda. West African leaders are pressing Guinea-Bissau's coup officers to restore constitutional order, urging them to allow the release of election results from the disputed November 23 presidential election. The visit marks ECOWAS's most direct attempt yet to reverse the military takeover in the country. Nigeria's Defense Minister Muhammad Babadura Abubakar has stepped down, citing health concerns. And Indonesia and Sri Lanka have deployed their militaries to assist survivors of the devastating floods caused by separate weather systems in recent days. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And it's time to find out what's been happening in the world of sport overnight. And with the details, we say good morning to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. Now, Hugo Bruce, the head coach of the South African men's national football team, Bafana Bafana, has announced his 25-man squad for the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco. So the Belgian mentor has included two uncapped overseas-based youngsters, Chandre Campbell as well as Tylon Smith. Veteran midfielder Themba Zwane, Ekram Reyners as well as Thapelo Morena were all part of the last AFCON squad with surprise missions. Bruce explained the thinking behind the inclusion of the 20-year-olds Chandre as well as Tylon.
I think it's a great opportunity for those two players to adapt to a higher level. To see what's happening with Bafana, what's happening on the training. So they have a lot to learn now in the next weeks. And I took them, first of all, with for their quality, but also we don't have to count really on them to play games. Okay, if the opportunity is there, we can give them chances.
Now, Bruce also selected a 54 preliminary squad just last week, but had to trim it to 25 players. He sympathised with the players who did not make the final cut.
When you have to go back from 54 to 25, that means that you have to drop 30 players. And I'm sure of it that in those players I had to drop, that there will be players who maybe deserve to be with us in AFCON next month or in a few weeks. but have to take those decisions. And it was not easy. For some positions, it was easy. But for other positions, Helman and me had a few minutes to think about, to discuss.
Onto this now, Tottenham Hotspur manager Thomas Frank says he's very confident that he has the backing of the club's owners. Now, Spurs' only Premier League home win under Frank, who joined from Brentford United in June of this year, was the opening weekend fixture against Burnley. They have just 18 points so far from 13 games and sit in 12th place on the log table, with some fans criticising the Danish coach. Now, our fans at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium booed goalkeeper Gianlimo Visario after his mistake that led to Fulham's second goal in Saturday's 2-1 defeat, Spurs' 10th home loss this season. Now, the Dane said after the defeat that those who booed the goalkeeper can't be true Tottenham Hotspur fans, and also called the actions completely unacceptable. On to netball news now. South Africa's national netball team, the Spar Proteas, are expected to face England in a test series early next year. The series, scheduled for the 29th of January to the 1st of February, will see the England Roses arriving in the country 2 weeks before the centre pass. Now, the newly elected Netball South Africa president, Mami Diale, says the decision to secure England as opponents was made at the request of the national coaches. The ambition is to push South Africa into the top 3 of the world rankings, and Diale believes completely against higher-ranked teams is essential for growth and development.
Aim to play against them until they win them, because we want to see ourselves as top 3, top 4 in the world. So the best is to target a certain country in order to defeat them. If you could have seen this year in 2025, we went to Jamaica to test them. We went to England. We went to Australia and New Zealand. So the feedback is the focus will be on England, to play them constantly so as we can be able to defeat them.
Now, before turning the attention to England, Diale says Netball South Africa's focus is on defending both the men as well as the women's African Nations titles in Malawi later on in December.
We're going to Malawi from the 7th until the 13th. For the Africa Cup to defend our title for both males and females. We respect Africa, so that's why we participate in there.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember to also give us a call on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Muranziwa wa mina. Muranziwa means my love in Xitsonga. So if you're listening to this, just know that you are my love. Yes. You and I are an item. We're dating. We are together. So I love you, baby. Why are you blushing? Why are you blushing? Like, haven't you heard somebody confessing their love to you? I mean, you gotta get used to it now, because I'm gonna tell you this every day, that I love you. I can tell you, there are so many people who are never told they are loved. I come to the studio every Monday, 12 to 3, because I've got an appointment with you. I take you serious. Forget about the other person, right? Moranziwa.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege.
Let's now find out what's happening in the world of business. We say good morning to Matapelo Mahape with the latest update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. Nigeria's upstream regulator has announced the start of its 2025 oil licensing round, offering 50 blocks for bidding as Africa's biggest crude producer seeks to boost output and attract new investment. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulator Commission said the round includes 15 onshore blocks, 19 in shallow waters, 15 frontier assets, and 1 deep water block. The regulator's chief executive, Bega Komolafe says that the Nigeria 2025 licensing round is expected to attract about $10 billion in investment and add up to 2 billion barrels of oil output over the next 10 years, with an estimated 400,000 barrels per day of producing when fully operational. And the British government has decided to end UK export finance support for the Total Energies-led Mozambique liquefied natural gas project. Britain had promised financial support of $1.15 billion for the $20 billion project via UKEF in 2020. The development was scheduled to make the African nation a major LNG exporter to Europe and Asia, but it has halted in 2021 due to an Islamist insurgency in the region. And on to this now, South Africa's power utility Eskom has reported a profit of $1.4 billion for the first 6 months ended September 2025. The improvement in the power utility's financial and operational performance has been attributed to the successful implementation of the turnaround strategy as well as decisive and effective leadership. Eskom interim financial results coincided with the end of the board's term on the 30th of this month. Eskom spokesperson Daphne Mugwena details some of the key milestones achieved by the board since its appointment in 2022.
Under the board's oversight, Eskom delivered 96% electricity supply reliably in 2024-2025, improving to 98% year to date, a dramatic recovery from the low 9% in 2022-2023. The Generation Recovery Plan, approved by the board and implemented in March 2023, drove sustained operational improvements through focused maintenance at 6 priority stations and stretched EAF targets across the fleet.
And a pipeline operator, Targa Resources, says it will buy stakeholder midstream in a $1.25 billion all-cash deal, expanding its processing capacity in the key Permian Basin. Deal-making in the midstream sector has been picking up pace as companies look to cut costs out, add scale, and gain access to attractive oil and gas producing regions as well as export facilities on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Targa exports to stakeholder to generate adjusted free cash flow of about $200 million annually. And manufacturing was weak in Europe and Asia's biggest companies in November. This as a subdued domestic demand and tariff uncertainties weighed. The Eurozone, China and Japan also manufacturing activity contract last month, although there were bright spots for Britain and economies in Southeast Asia which saw growth. A look at your financial indicators. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 443. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 88. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 30. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 88. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 34. Russia at 77 rubles 40. India, it's 89 rupees 54. China at 7 yuan 6. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands and 9 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,221 and platinum at $1,663 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $63.19 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapala Mahape.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
6:43 Central Africa time. Let's take a look at this story now. The 2025 Landmine Monitor report has revealed a sharp rise in global casualties from landmines and explosive remnants of war, the highest recorded since 2020. Now, this report shows that civilians, especially children, continue to bear the brunt of these deadly weapons as conflicts deepen and contaminated land it continues to expand. Our reporter Lebohang Mabange has more.
The latest landmine monitor paints a grim picture. 6,279 people were killed or injured in 2024, an average of 17 people harmed every day, nearly half of them children. Myanmar recorded the highest casualty toll at 2,029, more than double last year. At the launch of the report, experts underscored the continued humanitarian consequences of landmines and explosive remnants of war. Dr. Fifi Eduaful is the senior researcher for UNIDE's Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program.
Established in 1998, the Landmine Monitor is a pioneering civil society initiative that provides comprehensive reporting on landmine ban, with particular attention to the universalization and implementation of the 1997 Mine Ban Treaty. More broadly, it assesses the international community's response to the humanitarian consequences of landmine, cluster munitions, and other explosive remnants of war.
The monitor warns that casualties are rising fastest in countries where mines have been newly deployed in recent years, and that the support required for victims falls far short of the escalating need. Dr. Eduaful elaborated on the rising human cost.
Casualty figures for 2024 are higher than previous years, with civilians disproportionately affected, and particularly in countries where mines were recently deployed. The global number of victims continue to rise, yet resources and services for assistance remain insufficient to meet the growing needs.
Beyond casualties, the report raises serious concerns about compliance with the Mine Ban Treaty. 2 countries have joined the treaty this year, bringing membership to 166, but several European states have begun the process of withdrawing. At the same time, allegations of new mine use emerged in multiple regions. Yeshua Mosa Puangsuan, Ben Policy Editor for Landmine Monitor 2025, outlined developments that threaten the integrity of the global ban.
Ukraine has claimed it can suspend the implementation of the Mine Ban Treaty while using anti-personnel mines and acquiring stockpiles from the United States and possibly producing some. 5 Baltic countries, Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, are in the process of withdrawing from the treaty. And there are serious allegations of Cambodia using anti-personnel mines along its border with Thailand, both states parties to the Mine Ban Treaty.
The report also documents extensive mine use by states outside the treaty, with both state and non-state actors deploying increasingly sophisticated types of devices, including those delivered by drones. Mosa Puangsuan described the widening pattern of mine use.
Extensive use was documented by Myanmar and Russia, both which are not states parties to this convention. 2 other states not parties, Iran and North Korea, were reported to use landmines along their borders. Iran on its border with Pakistan, North Korea in the DMZ between it and South Korea. Since February of 2022, the monitor has reported at least 13 types of anti-personnel mines used by Russia and Ukraine. Since late 2023, the monitor found Russian forces posting photographic images online indicating use of at least 4 types of anti-personnel mines and 2 types of anti-vehicle mines delivered by drone.
Despite the worrying trends, several countries made progress in land clearance. More than 1,100 square kilometers of contaminated land were released in 2024, an area roughly the size of Hong Kong, and more than 105,000 1,000 anti-personnel mines were destroyed. Catherine Atkins, senior researcher with the Landmine Monitor Impact Team, highlighted states that met their clearance obligations.
Oman earlier this year is the first state party to complete clearance of anti-personnel mines since 2020, with only 5 other state parties that have completed clearance since 2014. This includes Burundi, Mozambique, Algeria, Chile and UK, whereby Mozambique and Algeria still have residual contamination left, and Mozambique is also suspected to be contaminated with improvised mines. And also the UK destroyed some newly discovered individual single mines in the Falkland Islands.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange.
South Africa's power utility, Eskom, has reported a $1.4 billion profit after tax in the first 6 months to end of September. Eskom released its unaudited interim financial results that show an increased EBITDA to $4 billion. This is the second consecutive year that Eskom has turned a profit after years of bailouts that have weighed on the country's fiscus. Dimakadzo Leshuru has more.
The power utility says the 6 months interim results to end September 2025 demonstrate last year's profit was not a once-off. Eskom says its turnaround plan continues to strengthen the utility's performance, resulting in a sharp rise in profits and improved system reliability. Daphne Mokoena is Eskom's spokesperson.
These figures underscore both recovery and sustained improvement in EAF performance, reinforcing energy security and grid stability.
Eskom reported a 41% jump in profit before tax to $1.8 billion, while profit after tax rose to $1.4 billion. Revenue was up 4% to $11 billion. Its EBITDA, that is the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization, a profitability metric that measures the company's core operating performance, rose to $4 billion. Last year, Eskom saw a $934 million profit after tax, its full year profit in 8 years. Energy expert at Empower, Matthew Cruz, elaborates.
And that profit is in comparison to a loss that they made at the end of 2023 financial year at 31st March 2023 of 23.9 billion rand. So that's quite a significant difference. It's about a 40 billion rand difference in turnaround, going from a loss to a profit this year. And that was only over a 2-year span. So this is a significant financial improvement. And at the same time, it's also, while they were able to improve the energy availability factor, they've neglected to include 2 key pieces of information that I think were significant in assisting Eskom to turn around. The first was that they received 254 billion rand from the government as a bailout in the middle of 2023. It was to be spent over the following 3 years, which is a significant amount of money, 254 billion rand. They kind of omitted that they received basically half of financial year's revenue from the government for free. The second one was private industry's input and impact, installing about 6 gigawatts worth of electricity in terms of solar panels, in terms of electricity production over those same 2 years. And this significantly helped Eskom have some breathing room to do their maintenance.
Eskom's strong performance is aided by above-inflation tariffs and lower finance costs. Net finance costs fell by 14% due to lower interest rates and a steep reduction in recurring electricity blackouts. South Africa's energy regulator controversially granted Eskom a 12.7% increase in tariffs this year. The process of determining this increase was found to be unconstitutional by a court of law. Cruz says South African consumers will be beset with higher-than-inflation tariff increases in the coming year.
Currently, we're needing to choose between buying electricity or buying food. So there's always like this story, this context in this nation of electricity is too expensive, and Eskom saying we need more money. And that's unfortunately still going to be the case going forward, as I project that there will once again, after these next 2 years of increases, also double-digit increases again. And they're going to say, it's because we had all these operational expenditures. They won't mention necessarily there was diesel, but they just said we had a lot of money that was spent.
The power utility says improved plant availability meant load shedding was limited in the period under review. But financial challenges remain. Sales volume fell 3%. Municipal area debt has continued to climb, reaching $6.1 billion despite 71 municipalities joining the relief program.
The continued improvement in EAF has significantly reduced Eskom's reliance on costly diesel generation, allowing the company to focus more on cost-effective primary energy sources. Additionally, 6 generation units equivalent to 2,341 megawatts are currently on coal reserve due to excess capacity.
The newly appointed board that comes into office on the 1st of December will have to take forward the $18.7 billion capital investment over the next 5 years, mainly for maintaining generation and network infrastructure and expanding the transmission grid to support renewable energy integration. For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro.
The Madlanga Commission in South Africa got off to an explosive start with retired Ekurhuleni Metropolitan City Manager Dr. Imogen Mashazi. She took to the stand on Monday. Dr. Mashazi accused the suspended Ekurhuleni Metro Police Chief Jabulani Mapiyeye of abusing his position to take advantage of his subordinates. Mashazi alleges that various cases of sexual harassment have been brought against Mapiyeye, and this includes a case of rape that's been opened against him. Chief Mapiyeye has since been placed on suspension over these allegations. The Madlanga Commission is a judicial commission of inquiry into criminality, political interference, and the corruption in the criminal justice system in South Africa. Sibatle Mota has more.
Retired Ekurhuleni City Manager Dr. Imogen Mashazi alleged that suspended police chief Jabulani Mapiyeye is at the center of sexual harassment allegations at the Metro Police Department. Dr. Mashazi testified that Mapiyeye abused his powers on his subordinates by allegedly sleeping with them and fathering children with them.
The pattern of behavior described is deeply troubling and reflects a systematic abuse of authority by the chief of police. And he used to call them amangilos. He calls them amangilos, like angels. Those who are angels, these are the ones who are actually promoted. And if you look at the promotion of Tepa, who actually testified here, you can see that she was promoted within a short period of time as compared to others who have more qualifications, who were there before her, who were appointed before her.
Dr. Mashazi's claims were not without any scrutiny from the evidence leaders. Commissioner Sesi Baloyi SC questioned Mashazi why she did nothing when women in the EMPD were crying out for help from her over the sexual harassment claims leveled against Mapiyeye and other accused.
I think, Doctor, it's more than the program is not enough. I think it's as specific as you receive word from women who speak to you. Because you raise it to a formal level, they tell you, we have a problem. And it's not just the chief, according to your evidence. They say the men in EMPD, this is what they do. What in fact it is you did nothing about that. Your explanation for doing nothing about it is you say, well, I didn't have any formal written complaints or allegations.
Mashazi's allegations that Mapiyeye has fathered multiple children with his subordinates was also tested by evidence leader, Advocate Mahla Besillo.
At that time, it was communicated to you how many women specifically confirmed this situation. How many?
I do not recall the number.
Was it 2 or 10 or 20?
I do not recall the number.
That bad, Doctor?
Thank you.
I'm asking, it's a question. Is it that bad that you can't recall whether it's 2 or 10 or 20?
Remember, ma'am, I'm running 26 departments, and each and every department we have, in police only, we have more than 3,005 officials.
Suspended Police Chief Mapiyeye and suspended Head of Employee Relations, Xolani Ngciza, have testified that Mashazi protected Brigadier Mkhwanazi from any disciplinary processes. They have further alleged that Mashazi called them to withdraw charges against Mkhwanazi for the Blue Light saga, but Mashazi denied the allegations to Commissioner Sandile Khumalo SC.
If you did not instruct either Mapiyeye or Ngciza to stop the disciplinary proceedings, then who did? Why did they suddenly stop the disciplinary process of Brigadier Mkhwanazi?
Let me indicate that even the internal report that is that they are basing the investigation on, I was not even copied. I don't know. I haven't seen the report. So I was far from this process. I do not know, and I did not stop anyone from disciplining.
Mashazi returns to the stand at 9:30 a.m. I am Sibahle Mota in Pretoria.
Right, it's a little bit before the top of the hour, and Asanda knows me well now that I love to look back in history on this day, and I am going to do that right now. Today in history, the what shall I pick here? So, 2nd of December 1982, bizarre event took place in Kenya. Kenya's President Daniel Arap Moi survived an assassination plot. A foiled attempt against Moi's leadership was revealed publicly, tightening security and marking a turning point in Kenya's internal political climate. And I've got to say, it has never been the same again since. And we've seen bloody elections, very competitive, very tribal, sadly as well. And it just has never really changed. It's been a difficult time. So Arap Moi surviving an assassination attempt on this day, 1982.
Right.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
That we enter now the second hour of Rise and Shine. It is just almost 7 o'clock Central African time. And good morning if you've just joined us, coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. At this hour, we look at Guinea-Bissau, which remains in crisis just days after the military seized power there, just as we're coming from an attempted assassination in Kenya. And this day in history, news is news, but nothing really changes that much. So that story coming up, and then also we go to Cameroon to find out what's happening there as there are tensions in the country.
Yes, indeed. This is the second hour of the program, and you're with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda, broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa.
I forgot my name.
Let's say good morning now to Onele Nsinsi, who brings us the news at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. West African leaders are pressing Guinea-Bissau's coup officers to restore constitutional order, urging them to allow the release of election results from the disputed November 23 presidential vote. Leaders from the ECOWAS bloc, led by Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio, held tense talks in Bissau yesterday with the officers who seized power last week. The visit marks ECOWAS' most direct attempt yet to reverse the military takeover in a country long troubled by political instability. Sierra Leone's Foreign Minister Timothy Musa Kaba said ECOWAS is demanding the restoration of constitutional order and the logical conclusion of the electoral process. The bloc will decide next steps, including possible sanctions at the December 14th summit. South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says, contrary to speculation, the party's National General Council will not discuss the removal of the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. This follows reports that the NGC might be turned into a leadership contest after some senior ANC members reportedly said they wanted to see the removal of Ramaphosa. Mbalula has dismissed the suggestions that there are leadership issues in the ANC.
There is no leadership struggle in the ANC at all. These are stories that are planted deliberately by forces from within and outside our movement who are hell-bent on disintegrating the ANC. And these dark forces are not sleeping. They are working overtime to disintegrate the ANC. This is not the time to be discussing leadership when we are faced with an existential crisis as a movement. The focus of the ANC in this moment is rebuilding and renewal.
Nigeria's Defense Minister Muhammad Badaru Abubakar has stepped down, citing health concerns. His resignation comes at a time when the country is dealing with a renewed surge in attacks and mass kidnappings. This as government struggles to curb the activities of extremist groups and criminal gangs. Survivors who fled the fall of al-Fashir in Sudan's Darfur region have given harrowing accounts of abuses by the paramilitary rapid support forces. People now sheltering in a camp in the army-controlled territory in northern Sudan say they witnessed mass killings, sexual violence and detention for ransom. Muhammad Abake Adam worked at the Zamzam camp for displaced people and fled when the RSF advanced.
They shot some people directly in front of us. Then they carried them and threw them far away. And on the road, we saw dead bodies out in the open. They would take a woman behind a tree or take her far from us, out of sight, so you wouldn't see with your own eyes. But you would hear her shout, "Help me, help me." And she would come and say, "They raped me."
Lastly, Indonesia and Sri Lanka have deployed their militaries to assist survivors of the devastating floods in recent days. More than 600 people are now known to have been killed on the Indonesian island of Sumatra in flash flooding and landslides. At least 350 people are dead in Sri Lanka. Hundreds of thousands have been left homeless in both countries. A woman called Rosmina, who lives north of Sumatra in Indonesia, details her escape from the floods.
Suddenly, someone ran from the garden. "Come on, run, run. The big water's coming," he said. So I immediately ran to save my child. I had to get out of the house and save my child. The water from the house was already up to their knees.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Hugo Bruce names his 25-man squad to the Africa Cup of Nations tournament, while the Blitzboks can't wait for redemption on home soil. I'll tell you more at 7:30.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Guinea-Bissau has been thrown into yet another period of uncertainty. This after the military seized control in the aftermath of a disputed election, with tensions rising over the fate of opposition presidential candidate Fernando Diaz. In a significant diplomatic move, Nigeria has now stepped forward, offering protection to Diaz, a gesture that underscores Abuja's growing concern about democratic backsliding in the region. ECOWAS, already under pressure following coups in the Sahel, is demanding the release of verified election results and a swift return to constitutional order. To help us understand the seriousness of this moment, Nigeria's strategic calculations, and what it all means for West Africa, we're now joined by Channel Africa's Nigeria correspondent, Jonathan James Liamgon. Jonathan, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Peter, and nice to talk to you too.
So, what is Abuja's position on what's happening in Guinea-Bissau?
Well, based on what we have at the last take, the Nigeria's Minister for Foreign Affairs had written to ECOWAS and letting the West African States Commission leader, that's Omar Toure, to know that Nigeria has decided that the presidential candidate, that's the opposition candidate, Fernando Diaz da Costa, that Nigeria, having assessed that his life has come under threat, given certain things that have happened following the what Nigeria now refers to as a fake coup, it has decided to grant him asylum in Nigeria's foreign mission or at the Nigeria embassy in Bissau. Now, this didn't just happen without a precedence or without certain things. Nigeria's former president, Goodluck Jonathan, who was on a team of ECOWAS observer mission during the elections and was even said to have been stranded following the cancellation of the elections by the military, returned to Nigeria and went to brief President Tinubu about the situation. And it is strongly believed that the decision by Nigeria has come following President Goodluck Jonathan's briefing to President Tinubu. Now, after President Goodluck Jonathan visited President Tinubu, he briefly spoke with the media and he maintained his stand, something he had said even previously, that he is very convinced that that coup was shambolic. It's a sham in itself because the immediate president, Mbalo, was the first person to announce that coup via his phone before the military. So President Goodluck Jonathan believes that the immediate president, Omaro Mbalo, he's kind of complicit in what he calls a fake coup. And Nigeria, having suffered some of the issues it suffered when it took a rash position following the Niger coup and the coup in Mali and the Burkina Faso, I think what we have seen now is that Nigeria is being very calculating, not in a hurry to make very tough statements, considering that it couldn't walk the talk the last time. So that is the situation on ground. Peter?
So, what is Fernando Diaz being offered by Nigeria at this time?
In the first instance, Nigeria, in the letter that Nigeria has written to ECOWAS, it has offered him asylum in Nigeria's mission in Guinea-Bissau. But from the feelers that we have, what will most likely follow is that there will be a negotiated exit. Because you will recall that in the case of Niger, because Nigeria believes that because it didn't react quickly and because it trusted that the coup plotters were going to release the former president, it didn't take this kind of measure. However, a while since, like over 2 years since that coup, the former president is still being held in Niger and hasn't been allowed to leave. And Nigeria is taking measures to ensure that this doesn't happen in the case of Guinea-Bissau. But a lot of observers now say it remains to be seen how Diaz da Costa is going to leave the country. While given diplomatic immunity, he can be able to stay in Nigeria's foreign mission. For him to be extracted out of the country, it will require a significant negotiation between Nigeria, ECOWAS, and the military of that country. Peter?
All right, so I guess people might be asking themselves why Nigeria is stepping in so assertively in this moment. Is it much to do with President Tinubu's broader priorities for democracy across the region, stability across the region? And you did mention earlier on, little was done when it was Niger, Burkina Faso, and Niger, right?
Yes. I mean, well, it's a mixed set of reasons. First and foremost, President Tinubu is still reeling from the punch to his nose following those coups, and you will recall that his words were quick and they were firm. But the results that followed proved to be otherwise. Many believe that he was very, very very ashamed of how that situation panned out. And he doesn't want to walk that path anymore. Nigeria has positioned itself over the years as the leader in West Africa and as the bastion of democratic stability, having itself enjoyed an uninterrupted democracy since 1999. So almost 30 years of uninterrupted democracy in Nigeria, and believing that any and everything that happens in the West Africa sub-region should fall within the ethos and the principles that ECOWAS holds itself accountable. Now, you'd also recall that President Tinubu had held the ECOWAS chairmanship for 2 years before he recently ended his term. And many believe that all of this form a basis for that. And Nigeria is a believer that once all of these things keep persisting, then the case of Mickey Mouse copycat scenarios that we're recording now will continue. And in itself, remember that Nigeria in itself, only a couple of weeks ago or months, was embroiled in military coup scare. Some even say 2 coups were said to have been botched and twatted in Nigeria. And doing this is a way of sending a message that not in Nigeria, not around Nigeria, will Nigeria tolerate the carrying out of coups. Peter?
Has Guinea-Bissau responded at all to this move to offer sanctuary for Diaz?
We have not heard a word from the military junta that has assumed power in Guinea-Bissau yet, but we believe also from what we've seen that Guinea-Bissau doesn't have so much on its side, and it will. Some international scholars say it will certainly be wise for Guinea-Bissau to take the path being offered it, given many things that don't work in its favor. Unlike the case of Niger, Guinea-Bissau, for instance, is a much smaller country. Guinea-Bissau has a population that averages just about 2 million. And in the event of the mobilization of a West Africa force, Guinea-Bissau does not stand a chance. It is a smaller geographic entity, and it will not pose a problem. So many believe that Guinea-Bissau, unlike Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, will allow for this opposition leader to lead, because that pays the military more than assuming a different path. However, what we have also seen in the case of those other West African states that have got the way of military coups is that they have ended up bonding together. So much that they even exited ECOWAS and took other economic and political decisions. So it is still being observed to see. But the case of Guinea-Bissau is also further compounded by the fact that while the other countries that have participated in coups and now in under military rule, they are francophone-speaking nations. In the case of Guinea-Bissau, it is a Lusophone nation where Portuguese is the language, the official language being spoken there. That further makes its case different. So it is still being waited with bated breath to hear what the military will likely say today. Peter?
What do we know about Fernando Diaz? I mean, what he represents politically within Guinea-Bissau, that his safety is seen as so central to the legitimacy of the electoral process there?
Considering that Guinea-Bissau isn't a nation that typically would feature in major news headlines from day to day, quite frankly, not so much. My following of the elections in Guinea-Bissau was much more heightened when former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan was part of the team that went to cover the election. So once he was there, there was a lot more attention, and I started following much more. But he essentially is a relatively there's no much to him, but he has been an opposition fellow for a while, and his popularity really soared following what many Guineans or citizens of Guinea-Bissau said was the lackluster performance of the immediate president, Omaro Embalo, who didn't do much and wanted to return back into power by all means. And the citizens, as a show of not being on the side of the former president, put all of their support in favor of the opposition candidate, Diaz da Costa. And as a result, it was believed that he was leading the elections from all of the results that had come from the different areas in the country. While the final result itself was yet to be announced, it is believed that all of the evidence had shown that he was going to win. And given that the immediate president, Mbalo, didn't want that, it is now believed that he worked in cahoots with the military to twat the election. Peter?
Is there a genuine fear that, I mean, you mentioned it a short while ago about maybe copycat coups taking place, but is there a genuine fear that this current Guinea-Bissau crisis could disrupt regional states, regional cooperation, and maybe even security, trade, or movement of people?
Well, now in answering that, I'd say when you look at the trend, there is a strong fear that is genuine about it. When you look at what happened once Mali, the coup happened in Mali, remember that, first of all, there was actually in the other Guinea, which is Guinea-Conakry, there had been some issues as well. Then we had Burkina Faso, then we had Mali, and then Niger. And what many have seen is that this has continued to spiral out of what seems to be an out of control situation. And it is feared that letting this happen is going to add the headcount to 4 the countries in what could be said to have been used to be the ECOWAS bloc. And this then further means that should they continue to be, let me use the word now, disturbed, they will exit ECOWAS as the precedence has been set by these other 3 nations. Now, this situation is certainly going to weaken the ECOWAS bloc. Many believe that ECOWAS, during its 50th anniversary earlier this year, many believe the analysis we heard from many people was how ECOWAS in itself has failed to live up to its own mandate, to its own objectives when it was formed 50 years ago. And with such things, it is seen that this will further weaken it. And it is believed that that is why ECOWAS is leaving no stone unturned in wanting to ensure that this situation is arrested and this coup is reversed. But whether that will happen is left to be seen, because ECOWAS in itself lacks neither the capacity to mobilize the military nor the political clout to be able to apply punitive measures or sanctions that will make a country not suffer.
This offer of protection for Diaz by Nigeria, do you think that this has happened under the umbrella of ECOWAS, or is Nigeria acting alone here?
From what we've seen, Nigeria in this particular occasion is walking on very measured steps, because we saw Nigeria's minister, the letter that emanated out of Abuja yesterday didn't go to the coup plotters in Guinea, but went to the ECOWAS commission, which is in Abuja as well. So literally, it was just a case of a short dispatch. And what Nigeria has done is to speak as Nigeria, but to also speak via ECOWAS, signaling that in the event that ECOWAS isn't able to do much, Nigeria itself may seek to pursue its own stance. Now, admitting Diaz da Costa in Nigeria's High Commission, of course, instantly makes Nigeria his host. But the nature of also how the missions also operate is within the ECOWAS, when you are also the mission to any particular country, you also represent Nigeria's interest in ECOWAS in that country. So a liaison always operates between the country and the ECOWAS operation that is stationed in that country. So what we see now is Nigeria walking the path of being Nigeria and walking the path of cooperation with ECOWAS.
Jonathan, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks so much indeed for that comprehensive update. Always good talking to you.
Always nice. Same here, Peter. Have a nice day.
Take care. That was Jonathan James Liamgon, who's Channel Africa's correspondent in Nigeria, speaking to us about this offer of sanctuary by Nigeria to somebody in Guinea-Bissau who is looking like, if these election results do get announced, might actually be the new leader of the country. But as you can imagine, with this military coup, whether it's true or not, I mean a real one or not, there are forces that don't want him to take up that leadership position, and Nigeria is concerned for his safety. Yeah.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile has praised the remarkable impact of the Vincent Chabalala Education Trust, a 21-year community initiative in Alexandra Township that's in the Gauteng province of the country. The trust has supported more than 600 learners and produced 208 graduates. In an interview with Channel Africa on the sidelines of the trust's annual golf and dinner fundraiser, Mashatile reflected on the legacy of struggle hero Vincent Chabalala and the Trust's ongoing mission to empower young people through education. He also outlined South Africa's inclusive approach to hosting the G20 summit, extending participation to African nations and the broader global south, and addressed tensions with the United States ahead of next year's G20 gathering. Here's his conversation with Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe.
It's a community initiative. We started this 21 years ago in Alex, named after Vincent Chabalala, who was one of the soldiers of Mkhonto Wesizwe. He learned in Alex, Minerva High, before he went to exile. So after he passed on, we decided to do an education trust that will support the children of Alex, those who pass matric from poor families, so that they can go to colleges and universities. And later we started supporting the grade 10s and the grade 11s as well. We've got more than 600 children who have benefited from this trust over the last 21 years, with about 248 graduates. So it's quite a good journey over these years, and it's going strong. And really, its resources come from donations like this golf day, where companies come and play golf, donate. That's really how we raise the funds and we benefit these children, because they are the future.
Indeed. South Africa just hosted successfully the G20 summit.
Yes.
Can you share us the plan behind the scenes that led, from when we took over from the Brazilians to today? How did you as government do it? That was beautiful.
Well, right from the beginning, when we took over as the G20 president from Brazil, the president then said to us, let's do this as an African G20. Let's make sure that it's not just for South Africa. Even though a lot of them African countries are not members of the G20, but we felt that this must benefit the continent. So as a result, a lot of them participated as observers most of the times, but during the Leaders Summit, we invited them as guests and they were allowed to make inputs. So it was a good thing. You know that the US boycotted, said they are not coming, but it was a great success.
But also I saw
leaders came.
You extended the invitation to also the Caribbean.
Yes, I mean, we extended beyond Africa, we extended invitations to the global south. So you had, countries from the Caribbean, from Europe, the EU itself was here, from the East, those who are our partners in BRICS. So we made it broader. And I think that says a lot about its success. It was an inclusive process where we emphasize solidarity, we emphasize equality, we emphasize sustainability, and brought climate change on the agenda, the issue of looking at multilateralism and how we can change the architecture and the ecosystem of the global financing instruments to ensure that we can bring low-income countries to benefit, because often they are burdened by debt. So it was agreed in the discussion, even in the declaration, that let's do a lot to ensure that there is debt relief for low-income countries. So if you look at that declaration, it goes a long way in benefiting countries that we can regard as low-income countries with economies that are still struggling. And we were quite happy that, big countries from the G7, most of them were there, as you have seen, most of Europe, the East. So we're quite happy that this G20 was a big success.
And of course, now looking forward, the US has sent a message to say that they will not be welcoming us next year when they are hosting the G20. What is government's plan now to ensure that they mobilize or maybe lobby other countries that were here supporting South Africa so that South Africa can still be part of this? But of course, we saw the president coming out stronger and emphasizing that no, South Africa is a founding member of this particular multilateral system, and it will continue to support this multilateral system.
Well, we are part of the G20. The declaration has been adopted. So when we go to the US, because they have now taken over, it's their turn, they have to start on the basis of the declaration that is already adopted. We are determined to go and participate. So we'll continue to engage them. But this declaration adopted in Johannesburg is not the declaration of South Africa. It's a declaration of the G20. And I'm sure those countries will stand with us going forward.
So that was South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile in conversation with Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe. 7:30 Central African time it is. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. West African leaders are pressing Guinea-Bissau's coup officers to restore constitutional order, urging them to allow the release of election results from the disputed November 23 presidential election. ECOWAS is demanding the restoration of constitutional order and the logical conclusion of the electoral process. South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says, contrary to speculation, the party's National General Council will not discuss the removal of the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. This follows reports that some senior ANC members reportedly said they wanted to see the removal of the president. And the White House has defended the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth against allegations that in September he had instructed the U.S. military to kill everyone on board a suspected Venezuelan drug smuggling vessel. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Time now to get an African perspective on what's happening in the world of sport. Good morning once again, Rachel Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter Ndoro. Very good morning once again from the sports desk. So Hugo Bruce, the head coach of the South African men's national football team, has announced his 25-man squad for the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco. So the Belgian mentor has included 2 uncapped overseas-based youngsters, Chandre Campbell as well as Talon Smith, veteran midfielder Themba Zwane, Ekram Reyners as well as Tapelo Morena, who were all part of the last AFCON squad in 2024 with surprise emissions. Bruce explained the thinking behind the inclusion of the 2 20-year-olds in Campbell and Smith.
I think it's a great opportunity for those 2 players to adapt to a higher level, to see what's happening with Bafana, what's happening on the training. So they have a lot to learn now in the next weeks, and I took them, first of all, with for their quality, but also we don't have to count really on them to play games. Okay, if the opportunity is there, we can give them chances.
Now, Bruce selected a 55-man preliminary squad just last week, but had to trim it to 25 players. He sympathised with the players who did not make the final cut.
When you have to go back from 54 to 25, that means that you have to drop 30 players, and I'm sure of it that in those players I had to drop, that there will be players who maybe deserve to be with us in AFCON next month or in a few weeks. But I have to take those decisions, and it was not easy. For some positions it was easy, but for other positions, Helman and me had a few minutes to think about, to discuss.
Further afield now, Tottenham Hotspur manager Thomas Frank says he's very confident he has the backing of the club's owners. Now, Spurs' only Premier League home win under Frank, who joined from Brentford in June of this year, was the opening weekend fixture against Burnley. They have just 18 points from 13 games and sit 12th on the log table, with some fans criticising Thomas Frank. Now, fans of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium booed goalkeeper Giolimo Visario after his mistake led to Fulham's second goal in Saturday's 2-1 defeat, Spurs' 10th home league loss of the 2025-2026 season. So the Dane said after the defeat that those who boo the goalkeeper can't be true Tottenham Hotspur fans, and also called for their actions he called their actions completely unacceptable. On to some rugby news now. South Africa's Blitzboks team touched down in Cape Town this morning after their 5th place finish in Dubai, with Ricardo Duarte already looking forward now to another bite at the cherry. That cherry is the HSBC Sevens Cape Town event, the second leg of the 2026 series set for the DHL Stadium in the Western Cape province this weekend. Now, South Africa won last year's tournament for only the second time since it moved to Cape Town back in 2015, and Duarte says the team plays for love of the game, for the passion, as well as the chance to perform in front of family, friends, as well as loyal supporters. Now, the Blitzboks face a tough pool opening match against Dubai winners New Zealand, then face off with Fiji, who beat them 28-10 in over the weekend before closing out the group stages with a match against Great Britain. And finally, in some boxing news, unified heavyweight champion Olasanda Usyk has named Deontay Wilder as his first opponent, his first option for his next fight. Usyk, who stopped Daniel Dubois at Wembley Stadium in July to become the 2-time undisputed champion, vacated his WBO belt soon after, with Britain's Fabio Wadley upgraded to full champion. The 38-year-old Ukrainian says he wants Wilder up next, calling the match interesting. Wilder, once the division's most feared puncher, has struggled since his trilogy with Tyson Fury, suffering stoppage defeats to Joseph Parker as well as Zieli Zhang. The 40-year-old returned in June with a low-key win over Tyrell Anthony Herndon. And that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Call us as well on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with a final sports update on Africa Rise and Shine in the next hour. It is 7:36 p.m. Central African Time. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports. on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
So let's find out what's happening in the world of business now. We get an update from Matapelo Mahape.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. Nigeria is leading Africa in oil exports to the United States, supplying $2.57 billion worth of crude between January and August this year. According to reports, the West African nation accounted for more than half of all African crude imported by the U.S. during the 8-month period, shipping 33.23 million barrels out of a total of 60.75 million barrels, or 55% of all African crude imports into the U.S. this year. Senior international trade consultant and author of Economic Diplomacy of the Diaspora explains.
The surge is driven by a mix of global supply realignment and, of course, Nigeria's renewed refining momentum. With the U.S. cutting back on purchases from some Latin American and, Middle Eastern suppliers, due to, sanctions, quality concerns, and geopolitical tensions, it needed a reliable, Atlantic supplier. Nigeria fits that space perfectly well.
And the British government has decided to end the UK exports finance support for Total Energies' led Mozambique liquefied natural gas project. Britain has promised financial support of $1.15 billion for the $20 billion project via UKEF in 2020. The development was scheduled to make the African nation a major LNG exporter to Europe and Asia, but it has halted in 2021 due to an Islamist insurgency in the region. And South Africa's power utility Eskom has reported a profit of $1.4 billion for the first 6 months ended September 2025. The improvement in the power utility's financial and operational performance has been attributed to the successful implementation of the turnaround strategy as well as decisive and effective leadership. Eskom's interim financial results coincided with the end of the board's term on the 30th of this month. Eskom's spokesperson Daphne Mokoena details some of the key milestones achieved by the board since its appointment in 2022.
Under the board's oversight, Eskom delivered 96% electricity supply reliably in 2024-2025, improving to 98% year to date, a dramatic recovery from the low 9% in 2022-2023. The Generation Recovery Plan, approved by the board and implemented in March 2023, drove sustained operational improvements through focused maintenance at 6 priority stations and stretched EAF targets across the fleet.
Pipeline operator Targa Resources says it will buy stakeholder Midstream in a $1.25 billion all-cash deal, expanding its processing capacity in the key Permian Basin. Deal-making in the midstream sector has been picking up pace as companies look to cut cost or add scale and gain access to attractive oil and gas producing regions as well as export facilities on the U.S. Gulf Coast. And Samsung's Electronics unveiled its first multi-folding smartphone today in a bid to strengthen its position in a sector of the phone market where competition is expected to intensify. The launch of the Galaxy Z Trifold marks Samsung's bid to reinforce its footing in a segment where Chinese rivals have been gaining ground, even as analysts say the high price of producing challenges mean foldable devices are likely to remain a niche category for now. The model, priced as about $2,440 unfolds into a 253.1 millimeter, or rather 10-inch display using 3 panels, and it is nearly 25% larger than Samsung's latest foldable Galaxy Z Fold 7 model. A look at your financial indicators. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 443. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 88. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 30, and in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 88. The BRICS countries, $1 in Mozambique at 5 rupees 34, Russia at 77 rubles 40, India it's 89 rupees 54, China at 70 yuan 6, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rands and 9 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,218 and platinum at $1,652 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $63.23 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapala Mahabe.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Let's take you to this story in South Africa, where the country's Department of Basic Education, in partnership with the Education Outcomes Fund and a coalition of South African and international donors, are implementing partners, launched a $29 million US Early Childhood Care and Education Outcomes Fund on Monday. Now, this fund is expected to transform early learning for more than 100,000 children in the Eastern Cape Province, the KwaZulu-Natal Province, as well as Limpopo. This is where access to quality early learning remains among the lowest. Sisi Sechalo has more on the story.
The fund is set to support the Department of Basic Education's 2030 Early Childhood Development Strategy and Banapeli Blueprint, which aims to expand access, improve quality and child development outcomes for underserved children. South Africa's Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Kwagube, says investing in early childhood education has proved to improve the education system in many countries. She adds that the benefits include more children completing school and more children taking up the science, technology, engineering, and math subjects. She elaborates on why the funding is important.
The most exciting thing about this fund is the South African government has been able to put up 100 million over 3 years, which amounted to about 300 million. And of course, we had our global philanthropic and NGO partners match that funding and say, look, you've clearly demonstrated that you are serious about this investment, and so we will come to the party and invest with you. But the other unique feature about this fund is that it's not just another fund. It's an outcomes-based financing model, a form of a blended financing that says we have established what does success look like. So we want to be able to target children from 3 to 5 across the country, particularly those in underserved communities. We want to have 1.1 million new centers built in the next 3 years. We want to make sure that 115,000 learners are getting into the system.
Women in remote, rural, and disadvantaged communities who run early childhood development centers would be given a priority. Kwagube again.
we want to, one, improve existing early learning programs. Number two, we want to build new ones to be able to give greater access. So I think actually the women who are running early child development centers are going to be they're going to benefit the most. One, because they're going to benefit from further training and upskilling of these skills. Number two, also they will be able to offer something that gives them a competitive advantage in the community. Where do parents want to take their children? They want to take their children to a place where it is safe, structurally sound, where they have access to school nutrition, when they can play and learn. And so therefore, this will be really beneficial to our ECD practitioners, who really are the backbone of the sector.
Meanwhile, the Chief Programs Officer at Education Outcomes Fund, Milena Castelnau, has expressed that this particular funding is different and will be focused on the outcomes delivered by the implementing partners.
It's going to be implemented through 5 implementing partners. So their names are Smart Start, Early Learning Resource Unit, Ntataize, Impande, and the Unlimited Child. And the innovation in this fund comes from the fact that we're using an outcomes-based financing mechanism. So we only disburse the funding to the implementing partners when the results have been achieved. So that means when the quality has improved in the centers and when the children we've been demonstrating that the children are developmentally on track.
The department and its partners have sought to recruit the best partners to implement the fund. One of the implementers is an organization known as the Unlimited Child. The organization prides itself for having ensured that 2.5 million children in the country go into the classroom being ready for school. They are also the fastest growing organization in Africa and exist in 5 countries in the continent. The Chief Executive Officer of the organization, Candice Potgeta, elaborates on the work that they will be doing.
We are an implementing partner for existing ECD centers or early learning programs, ELPs. We'll be working in KZN with 224 ECD centers or early learning programs, and we want to make sure that the children in these programs go to school being ready and that they have a very high quality program. We actually will be taking early learning programs that already exist in communities. They just don't have a high quality program. So we know in South Africa we have a whole lot of child minding facilities. So these are women that look after children, but they don't have an educational program. So we are looking for these ELPs that exist, and we will be making sure that we train the ECD practitioner to run a well-functioning ECD center, that the children in her care have all of the toys and equipment that they need, and that the program that they have works and is a program that is curriculum linked in South Africa.
Meanwhile, the department has expressed that the funding model provides early childhood development practitioners with training, mentorship, and pathways to formal DBE registration that unlock government subsidies. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekgalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The 2025 Landmine Monitor report has revealed a sharp rise in global casualties from landmines and explosive remnants of war, the highest recorded since 2020. The report shows that civilians, especially children, continue to bear the brunt of these deadly weapons as conflicts deepen and contaminated land keeps expanding. Our reporter Lebuchang Mabange has more.
The latest landmine monitor paints a grim picture. 6,279 people were killed or injured in 2024, an average of 17 people harmed every day, nearly half of them children. Myanmar recorded the highest casualty toll at 2,029, more than double last year. At the launch of the report, experts underscored the continued humanitarian consequences of landmines and explosive remnants of war. Dr. Fifi Eduaful is the senior researcher for UNIDE's Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program.
Established in 1998, the Landmine Monitor is a pioneering civil society initiative that provides comprehensive reporting on landmine ban with particular attention to the universalization and implementation of the 1997 Mine Ban Treaty. More broadly, it assesses the international community's response to the humanitarian consequences of landmine, cluster munitions, and other explosives remnants of war.
The monitor warns that casualties are rising fastest in countries where mines have been newly deployed in recent years, and that the support required for victims falls far short of the escalating need. Dr. Eduaful elaborated on the rising human cost.
Casualty figures for 2024 are higher than previous years, with civilians disproportionately affected, and particularly in countries where mines were recently deployed. The global number of victims continue to rise, yet resources and services for assistance remain insufficient to meet the growing needs.
Beyond casualties, the report raises serious concerns about compliance with the Mine Ban Treaty. 2 countries have joined the treaty this year, bringing membership to 166, but several European states have begun the process of withdrawing. At the same time, allegations of new mine use emerged in multiple regions. Yeshua Mosa Puangsuan, Ben Policy Editor for Landmine Monitor 2025, outlined developments that threaten the integrity of the global ban.
Ukraine has claimed it can suspend the implementation of the Mine Ban Treaty while using anti-personnel mines and acquiring stockpiles from the United States and possibly producing some. 5 Baltic countries, Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, are in the process of withdrawing from the treaty. And there are serious allegations of Cambodia using anti-personnel mines along its border with Thailand, both states parties to the Mine Ban Treaty.
The report also documents extensive mine use by states outside the treaty, with both state and non-state actors deploying increasingly sophisticated types of devices, including those delivered by drones. Mosa Puangsuan described the widening pattern of mine use.
Extensive use was documented by Myanmar and Russia, both which are not states parties to this convention. 2 other states not parties, Iran and North Korea, were reported to use landmines along their borders. Iran on its border with Pakistan, North Korea in the DMZ between it and South Korea. Since February of 2022, the monitor has reported at least 13 types of anti-personnel mines used by Russia and Ukraine. Since late 2023, the monitor found Russian forces posting photographic images online indicating use of at least 4 types of anti-personnel mines and 2 types of anti-vehicle mines delivered by drone.
Despite the worrying trends, several countries made progress in land clearance. More than 1,100 square kilometers of contaminated land were released in 2024, an area roughly the size of Hong Kong, and more than 105,000 anti-personnel mines were destroyed. Catherine Atkins, senior researcher with the Landmine Monitor Impact Team, highlighted states that met their clearance obligations.
Oman earlier this year is the first state party to complete clearance of anti-personnel mines since 2020, with only 5 other state parties that have completed clearance since 2014. This includes Burundi, Mozambique, Algeria, Chile, and UK, whereby Mozambique and Algeria still have residual contamination left, and Mozambique is also suspected to be contaminated with improvised mines. And also the UK destroyed some newly discovered individual single mines in the Falkland Islands.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange.
7:55 Central African Time, and it's a little bit before the top of the hour. Let's take a look at this story now. President Donald Trump is facing a renewed scrutiny over his handling of foreign policy on 2 fronts, escalating tensions with Venezuela, whilst simultaneously expressing confidence in peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Now, the following confirmation of a phone call with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and a warning declaring Venezuelan airspace closed. Butlale Pile has more.
Speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump confirmed that he had had a phone call with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, but refused to give any details, saying it was only a phone call. The comment came a day after he publicly warned airlines, pilots and traffickers that the Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed in its entirety, a statement which sparked anxiety in the Caracaras, but which Trump insists should not be interpreted as signaling an imminent airstrike.
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
In Venezuela, the National Assembly says it is launching an investigation into what it calls extrajudicial executions after U.S. strikes on suspected drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean. Lawmakers say they will activate the Prosecutor General's office and demand accountability over what they describe as unlawful killings.
Vamos a activar la acción de la Fiscalía. We will activate the action of the Attorney General's office to address the crimes committed against Venezuelans and Latin Americans que se han cometido contra venezolanos y contra latinoamericanos.
At the same time, Trump is projecting optimism over negotiations to end the more than 3-year-long war between Russia and Ukraine. After the U.S. and Ukraine talks in Florida, he said discussions are going along well, despite acknowledging that corruption in the Ukraine complicates progress. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to travel to Moscow next week for further talks.
But I think that there's a good chance we can make a deal.
Ukraine says the discussions have been difficult but productive, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio describes the negotiations as delicate, with more work to be done. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the next few days will be critical for the direction of the talks. Trump maintains he wants the war to end as soon as possible, while facing intensifying pressure over his Venezuelan policy and growing concern over rising regional tensions. I'm Batali Pile, SABC News.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
The third hour that we enter into now of Rise and Shine. Good morning. If you've just joined us, we are Channel Africa from the African perspective, bringing you news and current affairs. My name is Asanda Beda. In this hour, we look at the Women's Legal Center, an African feminist legal organization, and they are in advocacy, and they are wanting to add their voice to the debate that's happening in South Africa with the launch of a social campaign. The campaign is called Name Him. We'll find out what that's all about. In fact, this hour we dedicate most of our stories to gender-based violence and femicide, and you'll be talking about safe houses.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Often a lot of women, when they're in abusive situations, stay because they actually have nowhere to go. And so safe houses become a really, really important place of refuge for them. So we'll be chatting about that as we focus every Tuesday. One of the missions of the SABC and its channels is to focus on the scourge, which is gender-based violence. I'm Peter Ndoro with Asanda Beda, broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa. It is now 8 o'clock, which means it's time for the news with Onele Nsinzi, with sports headlines with Musubudi Makura.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The West African leaders are pressing Guinea-Bissau's coup officers to restore constitutional order, urging them to allow the release of election results from the disputed November 23 presidential votes. Leaders from the ECOWAS bloc, led by Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio, held tense talks in Bissau yesterday with the officers who seized power last week. The visit marks ECOWAS' most direct attempt yet to reverse the military takeover in a country long troubled by political instability. Sierra Leone's Foreign Minister Timothy Musakaba said ECOWAS is demanding the restoration of constitutional order and the logical conclusion of the electoral process. The bloc will decide next steps, including possible sanctions at their December 14th summit. Furthermore, Nigeria has offered Guinea-Bissau opposition presidential candidate Fernando Diaz protection at its embassy in the capital Bissau following the military coup. Diaz, a 47-year-old relative political newcomer, has said he was on track to win the November 23 presidential election before the military coup in the small West African nation last week. The opposition coalition backing Diaz has denounced the coup as a desperate attempt by President Umaru Sissoco Embalo and his supporters to block the proclamation of the election results. In Nigeria, Jonathan James Liamgon reports.
This didn't just happen without a precedent. Nigeria's former president, Goodluck Jonathan, who was on a team of ECOWAS observer mission during the elections and was even said to have been stranded following the cancellation of the elections by the military, returned to Nigeria and went to brief President Tinubu about the situation. And it is strongly believed that the decision by Nigeria has come following President Goodluck Jonathan's briefing to President Tinubu.
South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says contrary to speculation, the party's National General Council will not be discussing the removal of the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. This follows reports that the NGC might be turned into a leadership contest after some senior ANC members reportedly said they wanted to see the removal of Ramaphosa. Balula has dismissed suggestions that there are leadership issues in the ANC.
There is no leadership struggle in the ANC at all. These are stories that are planted deliberately by forces from within and outside our movement who are hell-bent on disintegrating the ANC. And these dark forces are not sleeping. They are working overtime to disintegrate the ANC. This is not the time to be discussing leadership when we are faced with an existential crisis as a movement. The focus of the ANC in this moment is rebuilding and renewal.
Nigeria's Defense Minister Muhammad Badaru Abubakar has stepped down, citing health concerns. His resignation comes at a time when the country is dealing with a renewed surge in attacks and mass kidnappings. This as government struggles to curb the activities of extremist groups and criminal gangs. The White House has defended the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth against allegations that in September he had instructed the U.S. military to kill everyone on board a suspected Venezuelan drug smuggling vessel. Hegseth is reported to have ordered a second airstrike against survivors clinging to wreckage. The BBC's David Willis reports.
The White House said today that Mr. Hegseth authorised the commander in charge of the operation, Admiral Frank Bradley, to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States was eliminated. And in a social media post, Mr. Hegseth also sought to deflect blame, saying he stood by the combat decisions Admiral Bradley had made. President Trump has been meeting with his national security advisors to discuss what to do next in regard to Venezuela. A Reuters report suggests he gave the country's president, Nicolas Maduro, until last Friday to leave the country safely.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za and call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Andre Onana left out of the Cameroon squad for the Africa Cup of Nations tournament, while South Africa's Blitzboks will be seeking redemption in Cape Town this weekend. We'll tell you more details of these and other stories at 8:30.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
All right, let's take a look at this now. The Women's Legal Center, an African feminist legal organization that advances women's rights and equality through litigation, advocacy, education, research, and training, has ignited national debate in South Africa with the launch of a social campaign. It's called Name Him. This civil disobedience campaign calls for the repeal of a section in the Criminal Procedure Act that criminalizes naming an accused rapist before they have pleaded in court. To share more about this campaign is Advocate Bronwyn Pithi, who is the lawyer leading the case that is challenging the constitutionality of this law. Advocate, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you, Sandra. Thanks very much for having the Women's Legal Centre on your show. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much for making time. Let's talk about that then. Firstly, the background of the Women's Legal Center, what forms part of your feminist agenda and your reach and so on.
So the Women's Legal Center is a public interest law center that represents the rights of women in South Africa, particularly women who have been disenfranchised historically and really have very little access to justice. So the impetus of the organization is to provide free legal advice, but primarily is to constitutionally challenge any laws that we find or believe are discriminatory, particularly against women or disproportionately affect women. So our programs cover a number of areas, violence being this one in particular that I'm responsible for, but we also litigate around relationship rights, land rights, the right to work in a free and favorable and safe environment, and then sexual reproductive health and rights. So we really look at furthering the law as a tool to achieve equality, substantive equality for women, and realizing the constitutional rights of women, primarily in South Africa, but we also work together with partners regionally and internationally to hold the South African government in particular accountable to the commitments that they have made through legislation and obviously with the constitutional framework.
So then you launched the Name Him campaign. Please tell us more about this campaign and also maybe delve into the fact that it's spelled NXME instead of NAME.
Thanks, Asanda. So a few years ago, we were approached by a client in relation to a section in the Criminal Procedure Act. And this really set off in motion a constitutional challenge to this particular section, a section which the Women's Legal Centre has been concerned about for a number of years. But the facts of this case gave rise to the constitutional challenge. There is a section in the Criminal Procedure Act which very clearly states that the details of an offence may not be published, and that includes the name of the accused in matters that involve sexual offences. It also includes extortion. Through the litigation so far, it looks like the Minister of Justice is not going to oppose that. But she is opposing the constitutional challenge to the section that says that an accused rapist or anyone who is accused of any type of sexual offence may not be named until he has pleaded guilty or not guilty in court. Now, on one hand, this may sound reasonable to some people, but this does not apply to any other type of offence. So in other words, if an accused person faces charges of murder, armed robbery, fraud, any of those big offences, equally violent, equally serious offences, those accused may be named. And when we say may be named, may be published in the newspaper, communities know the identity, etc. So it's only for sexual offences that sexual offenders are protected by this piece of legislation. And we think that that is disproportionately discriminatory because the vast majority of complainants are women of sexual offences. And we also very strongly believe that a law of this nature impedes proper investigations. So what we've done is launch a campaign in support of this constitutional litigation case, which is in the Western Cape High Court in March of 2026. And this campaign is called Name Him. And really what it is, it's the first public disobedience campaign, which is quite absurd in and of itself, of allowing people to name the accused rapist before he has pleaded, but through an emoji code. So we've set up a website which is called namehim.com, but the name him is NXME as opposed to NAME, indicating that it's anonymous. So people can go onto that site, sign the petition, would be wonderful, but can also symbolically name the rapist that is an accused person before court who no one can name. Just to point out that if somebody does name him, publish his details, put it in a newspaper, talk about it, etc., put it on social media, that person can face criminal charges for a period of imprisonment if they're convicted of up to 3 years. So it's a serious offense. The campaign really aims to show that even if you name an accused, we have to go to such a great extent to anonymize that accused. It's a random emoji code that comes up that symbolically names him. It cannot be broken. It's totally and utterly safe. But it's a symbolic way of women, supporters of women, family members, being able to name an accused. Very often they obviously know the name of the accused without being or falling foul of the law as it currently is. And that's really where we're trying to expose the absurdity of the law and then the absurdity of enabling women to name an accused before he's pleaded in a way that at least is only symbolic, but it shows the absurdity of the law.
What justification are our lawmakers giving for this anonymity? Why is anonymity protected for accused rapists, but not for suspects in other serious crimes, as you mentioned, like murder or armed robbery?
I think that's an absolutely central question. It's the central point to which we have, in our litigation, effectively questioned the Minister of Justice. And unfortunately, with respect, we believe that their approach is very disingenuous. Their approach in their papers has pointed out that the reason to keep his identity anonymous is to protect victims or complainants. And we believe that this is a disingenuous approach. Firstly, because there are other sections in the Criminal Procedure Act with a little bit of tweaking actually guarantee the anonymity of a complainant in a sexual offense if she or he chooses to remain anonymous. So we believe that there are other sections. This section specifically refers to an accused. And yes, there are situations, and the media in particular are very, very sensitive to this, that if an accused's name or identity in any way does link him to a complainant, that accused will not be named if the complainant is not comfortable with her identity being revealed. So the reasons that the government or the Minister of Justice have given for protecting the identity of the accused under the guise of protecting the identity of the complainant, we really believe is misplaced and is not the real reason behind it. Unfortunately, we believe that the reason behind it is steeped in myths and stereotypes, that women lie, that women can't be believed until the prosecution is 100% sure that they will be able to proceed with the prosecution. And we believe this is just incorrect in the sense that it discriminates. It puts forward all of these myths that women shouldn't be believed and that they lie and that they're vindictive. And we've got to move away from that, given that there are so many sexual offenses in this country. It really undermines the law and the law investigation and the law legal process of holding rapists and sexual offenders to account by allowing them to remain anonymous. It's worth pointing out that very often in matters of this nature, there can be a delay of between a year, 2 years, sometimes even 3 years before an accused rapist pleads, which means in all that time, he remains anonymous. And we believe actually can impede investigations. If people know that someone is before the courts on a claim against them of a sexual nature, there may very well be other victims who would come forward to support matters.
Absolutely. What are the next steps in this legal challenge?
So the good thing is that the pleadings have nearly come to an end, and we're just in the process of finalizing pleadings, and the matter is set down for the 3rd and 4th of March in 2026 in the High Court in the Western Cape. So that is the first point. the first hearing, as it were, although litigation has been going on for a couple of years now. We'll have a hearing, a 2-day hearing in the Western Cape High Court, hoping for a successful result in terms of declaring those sections unconstitutional, and then would hopefully be referred to the Constitutional Court for confirmation for the matter, or sorry, for those sections to be repealed.
How can the public support your efforts? Is there anything that we can do to repeal Section 152 2B?
Well, what we'd really like is, because first of all, a lot of people don't know this. So first of all, our intention is to really raise awareness around this and effectively how women are being discriminated and silenced yet again in an environment where gender-based violence, violence against women in South Africa has been recognized as an extraordinarily complex and very, very detrimental thing to our nation building, to the equality of women. So we would really appreciate the public to support us by signing our petition, which is on that namehim.com site with the nxme.com. And really for those people who would like to symbolically name a rapist who either in the past or currently was not able to be named, to really support that. We believe that if the Minister of Justice is aware of how many people are offended, horrified, cannot understand why this particular law discriminates so heavily against victims of sexual offences, where we should be helping victims of sexual offences in every possible way at the moment, we really hope that that will change the Minister's mind before we necessarily have to go into extended further litigation.
All right, so www.nxmehim.com.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Any social media handles or pages?
Hashtag name him. And then on our Instagram, you can follow us on the Women's Legal Centre, wlce.co.za is our website, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc.
All right. Thank you so much again for your time, Advocate.
Thank you so much for giving us the time. Appreciate it.
Right. Advocate Bronwyn Pithy is a lawyer leading the case that is challenging the constitutional of this law, where the Criminal Procedure Act criminalizes naming an accused rapist before they have pleaded in court, part of the Women's Legal Centre. And this is an African feminist legal organization that advocates for the rights of women, the equality of women. They do this through litigation, advocacy, education, research, and training.
The Upside, taking the African perspective to fresh levels.
From Channel Africa. We're about to have ourselves a good time right now. Come on, brother, man. It's a whole thing.
You've partnered up with Focalistic. Hey, based on a true story.
You know, it's actually crazy for you to put it like that, partnered up. You know, this is someone I look up to from a very long time. 3 years ago, we put out a single, Pele Pele.
Yeah.
You know, that was my first record with him. This project, based on a true story, the album was so highly anticipated and premeditated on our end, you know, because something we constantly, you know, kept on going back and forth about, but we never actioned it. It's actually quite crazy because all of this is happening whilst we are both working on our albums. You know, I'm working on my album 31314 because there's a record, 31314, the interlude. So it's like a prelude to the album, you know.
Let me pronounce it properly. Is it 31314? 31314.
The Upside, live and real. It's dynamic. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
South Africa's network of shelters for women and children is facing a growing crisis. Severe funding cuts, delayed government allocations, and rising levels of gender-based violence that have left many safe houses on the brink of closure, placing survivors at even greater risk. Now, to spotlight this emergency and to mobilize public action, social activist and researcher Celine Apollon, founder of the Pan-African Safe Spaces movement, Consolation, has co-launched a national campaign titled 16 Days to Protect Our Safe Houses. The campaign features daily short reels from shelters across the country, amplifying the voices of survivors, frontline workers, and partners calling for urgent support. Celine joins us now from Congo-Brazzaville to unpack the campaign, the scale of the crisis, and what can be done to keep these vital safe spaces open. Celine, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So, Celine, I wonder if we can start by getting a sense of the size of the crisis, the situation, how big it is that's facing South African shelters at this time.
Yeah, of course. So currently, right now, since the shutdown of USAID and many other just international development aid organizations, the funding was tied to these organizations and it's been completely cut. So for the shelters that are 200 plus shelters that exist in South Africa that have been dependent on that funding, they've lost it. So that's about 30% of the shelters in South Africa. And now the current ones are really, really existing day by day. And many of them are dependent on volunteers. And if you don't have volunteers that are able to show up, they're at risk of closing any day now. And so, for example, Ria Thuzana, which is one of the shelters participating in the 16 Days campaign, they've mentioned that they're completely dependent on volunteers, and even, the main leaders who are supporting and also investing in the shelter are considering, closing the doors and trying to find ulterior motives. So really, right now, it's really looking like there's very limited space available for survivors, and at the same time GBV is increasing intensely in terms of how it's impacting women and how it's making women even feel safe to even walk on the streets. So there's a huge gap in terms of services and also safety that's really, really needed for survivors.
So many listeners may not know the work that you do. Maybe you can briefly explain what Consolation is, the communities you work with, and why you focus on safe spaces across the continent.
Sure, of course. First I'll state that I experienced gender-based violence here in Congo-Brazzaville, where I live, and so I've survived that, and that really perpetuated me jump into this calling and jump into this mission, because I acknowledged I really didn't have any spaces to go to, and when I did find that space, whether it's a shelter, whether it was even just a coffee shop where I could talk to someone, I acknowledged the huge difference it made to actually jump into focusing on my mental health and my healing. And so looking at sub-Saharan Africa across the board, there really aren't really many shelters that exist. And the ones that do exist, they have little funding to begin with and don't have often a process of including survivors in the design process just to experience and determine how, the safe space should be designed, what services are needed, and also how it can be improved. So a lot of the currently existing shelters are really failing to serve the unique needs and healing needs of survivors in sub-Saharan Africa. So the goal of Consolation is really first looking at currently what exists. How can we improve the infrastructures? How can we create spaces that are actually integrated into nature instead of completely have no lighting, and that actually encourage survivors to stay and to heal and to walk through their journeys with one another. The second thing is developing funding, breaking down the structure that is completely dependent on Western funding streams, and pulling together different movements and different spaces and foundations on the continent to create micro grants to shelters and other safe spaces. And the third is actually what the campaign is all about. It's lifting up awareness, but it's also allowing survivors to direct and lead their own stories through various storytelling measures, including video, including poetry, and including radio as well.
Talking about stories, what kind of stories, testimonies have struck you the most actually during this campaign? Are there any examples that illustrate what is at stake if these shelters disappear?
Yeah, I think it's a very great question. I think the first one for me, which was one from one of the short videos that will be posted soon, is that the shelter wasn't even just a shelter, it was a home. It gave someone the idea, specifically one client, that they are worthy of even living. So it's beyond even this physical space, but it's the mental space that these spaces permit, that they foster and nourish and curate. That is so important. And even within the research that I do and with communities and with and by survivors, they all say the same thing, that it starts mentally and knowing that you even have the ability and are worthy of continuing to live, continuing to heal, and continuing to thrive eventually. And so that's really the key. It's beyond even just finding physical safety for a couple of days. It's finding a space where you can breathe and you can refine yourself, and where you can tell yourself that I'm going to keep going.
Tell us about these short stories. What do you think they're able to do? What impact have they been having?
Yeah, so to clarify, it's actually more of a 365 days campaign. So we're ready, getting ready to launch, but we'll be happy to share the link once we launch. And the reason behind 365 days is because every year there's a 16 days campaign, but we also wanted to acknowledge that it's not just 16 days, it should be 365 days a year that we're talking about this, that we're on the streets, that we're advocating for supporting survivors and ending gender-based violence. So that's just one thing. And the second thing is that the stories really are serving to um, first also amplify the importance of shelters, like I mentioned, but also amplify who's actually working in these shelters. What are their stories? And many of them actually were previous clients or previous people who experienced violence, who have healed, who have wanting to continue the mission. Others are people who have been working in the field for a long time, but also acknowledge that, working in this field for a while is traumatizing as well. You experience secondary trauma. You also need support, which is a huge another gap within shelters and just in general creating services not only for survivors but for the people working in these centers. Um, so that I would say is a bit about in terms of the stories and the impacts we hope to have. That this will galvanize funding not only for survivors as well, but creating a system that is sustainable, where shelter workers can have therapy on site if they need it, or there's multiple levels of transitioning back into the real world instead of just a one-stop center.
I know that we've been talking a lot about South Africa at the moment, but is this something that you're seeing right across the continent? Is it a similar story?
100%, 100%. Obviously, it's not the same story because every country, every even within every country, there's multiple hundreds of cultures. But it is the same story in the fact that there's a huge gap. There's been recently a study that happened across the world, but of course, the big gap was okay, there's no data on services and shelters that are on the sub-Saharan African continent. And so that was a huge gap. And even within the Global World Shelters Conference, there's a max of 20 participants that came from Africa due to various reasons, obviously visa difficulties, but also just in general, a disconnect in development of safe spaces on the continent, and also disconnect in funding and just solidarity within feminist movements in the world.
Celine, thank you so much indeed for the work that you're doing. We wish you the best and strength and hope that this movement really does make major shifts in this important work. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure.
That was Celine Apollon speaking to us from Congo, Brazzaville, and telling her personal story that this is something that happened to her. And as a result of that, a calling came for her to make sure that there are safe houses for people, women who are seeking refuge from the abuse that they're going through. It was quite a moving conversation to hear. And she herself, we're just looking at her picture, so tiny, so you can almost imagine a person abusing her.
These shelters are very important, also in terms of the journey to healing for a lot of these women who have mustered the strength to leave their abusive relationships or situations, because it gives them their dignity. Yeah, they're able to have a space where, especially those with kids, are able to live. They don't feel like they have to. What can I say? They have to prove in a way that they've become this less than of a person. And I know in the times that I've worked with some shelters, there's even programs of getting them to either upskill or study something, even simple things like doing gardening and baking and those kinds of activities that are part of that. And sometimes you'll take those things for granted because that's what you do on your daily life.
And you talk about the psychological aspect, and you hear stories of women that are abused to such a degree that the guy doesn't have to lock the door anymore because he's imprisoned the mind, and that needs unlocking and freeing. Which is why those small activities could mean a lot to a woman who's been through that, to say to her, you are still human, you are still this creative person, there are still dreams that you have. We recognize that. Yes, we're giving you shelter and food, but there's more to you. There's more to you. It's so easy to forget who you are in an abusive situation. Anyway, let's catch you up now with the day's news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. Nigeria has offered Guinea-Bissau opposition presidential candidate Fernando Diaz protection at its embassy in the capital Bissau following the military coup. Diaz, a 47-year-old political newcomer, has said he was on track to win the November 23 presidential election before the coup. South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says, contrary to speculation, the party's National General Council will not discuss the removal of the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. This follows reports that some senior ANC members reportedly said they wanted to see the removal of the president. And the death toll in the floods which struck Indonesia last week has now climbed to more than 500, with rescue workers still battling to reach affected areas. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
So let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. We say good morning to Musibudi Makura for an update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. A very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start with this story. So Andre Onana has been left out of Cameroon's squad for the Africa Cup of Nations tournament with the team in chaos after head coach Marc Bress was sacked amid allegations of subterfuge. Now, days after being re-elected as the Cameroonian Football Federation president, Samuel Eto'o and his executive committee announced Bress's dismissal in a dramatic statement on Monday. It featured considering a long list of accusations of professional failure leveled against the coach, also including inciting players to defy the federation. The Belgian appointed by Cameroon's sports ministry in April of 2024, a decision Eto'o immediately tried to reverse, is also accused of active collaboration with unknown individuals within the federation. He's also accused of failing to attend meetings, refusing to disclose his training programs, jeopardizing relationships with sponsors, and not releasing his squad selections on time, and using subterfuge to evade his professional obligation to hold press conferences. Now, Brice is replaced by one of his assistants, David Pagu, an experienced Cameroonian coach who has managed several teams in the country's top-tier football. Back home now, South African football legend Edward Magens Motale has likened the current senior men's national team to the Africa Cup of Nations winning squad of 1996. Motale was part of the Orlando Pirates' 1995 African Champions League winning squad, and 2 months later the country was crowned African champions on home soil. That team under coach Clive Barker had a strong Pirates representation, and after coach Hugo Bruce announced 9 Buccaneer players in his 25-man squad on Monday for the AFCON tournament in Morocco later on this month, Motale is seeing similarities.
The last time Pirate dominated Bafana, it was during us. Remember, when we won the AFCON, we had about 7 players. 7 good players in Bafana. And now, even in Chile now, it's us. Before it was Sundowns, now it's Orlando Pirates, and it's good. And you know, the good thing is that when Pirates start dominating, things just become easy, and trophies they just fall in place.
On to some rugby news now. South Africa's Blitzboks team touched down in Cape Town early this morning after their 9th finish place in Dubai, with Ricardo Duarte already looking forward now to another bite to the cherry. The cherry is the HSBC Sevens Cape Town event, the second leg of the 2026 series that is set for the DHL Stadium this weekend. South Africa won last year's tournament for only a second time since it moved to Cape Town in 2015, and Duarte says the team plays for love of the game, for the passion, as well as a chance to perform in front of family, friends, as well as loyal supporters. The Blitzboks face a tough pool opening match against Dubai winners New Zealand, then Fiji, who beat them 28-10 last Saturday, before closing the pool stages with a match against Great Britain. And finally, in boxing news, unified heavyweight champion Olasanda Usyk has named Deontay Wilder as his first option for his next fight. Usyk, who stopped Daniel Dubois at Wembley Stadium in July of this year to become the 2-time undisputed champion, vacated his WBO belt soon after, with Britain's Fabio Wadley upgraded to full champion. The 38-year-old Ukrainian boxer says he wants Wilder next year, calling the match interesting. Now, Wilder, once the division's most feared puncher, has struggled since his trilogy with Tyson Fury, suffering stoppage defeats to Joseph Parker as well as Zhilei Zhang. The 40-year-old returned in June with a low-key win over Tyrell Anthony Herndon. It's 8:38 a.m. Central African time, and that's a wrap of your sports news this hour. I'm back with more sports news with the On The Move team in the next hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Call us as well on +27 11714 4459. Back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et les bons dieux pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Let's check in with Matapelo Mahape now, and we find out what's happening in the world of business.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. Starting off with the story, Nigeria is leading in oil exports to the United States, supplying $2.57 billion worth of crude between January and August 2025. According to reports, the West African nation accounted for more than half of all African crude imported by the U.S. during the 8-month period, shipping 33.23 million barrels out of a total of 60.75 million barrels, or 55% of all African crude imports into the U.S. this year. Senior international trade consultant and author of Economic Diplomacy of the Diaspora, Collins Nekwe, explains.
The surge is driven by a mix of global supply realignment and, of course, Nigeria's renewed refining momentum. With the U.S. cutting back on purchases from some Latin American and, Middle Eastern suppliers, due to, sanctions, quality concerns, and geopolitical tensions, it needed a reliable, Atlantic supplier. Nigeria fits that space perfectly well.
And almost 2 weeks ago, the G20 Leaders Summit adopted a new global critical minerals framework. The adopted G20 Declaration on Critical Minerals aims to create a more stable and equitable supply chain for these vital resources by promoting value addition to producer countries like those in Africa. The framework will focus on protecting supply chains from disruption, increasing exploration in developing countries, and ensuring that wealth generated benefits the countries of origin through local processing and manufacturing, not just raw material exports. President Cyril Ramaphosa says that these minerals need to benefit the countries that they are extracted from.
The G20 leaders also agreed that the critical minerals that the world needs should benefit those countries and communities where those minerals are found and extracted. There was agreement that countries like South Africa should be able to process and beneficiate the minerals they mine before selling them to other countries as finished products. This will create jobs for our people. The agreements reflected in the G20 Leaders Declaration are just the beginning. We will continue to advocate for global progress on these and other priorities.
And the British government has decided to end UK exports of finance support for the Total Energies-led Mozambique liquefied natural gas project. Britain has promised financial support of $1.15 billion for the $20 billion project via UKEF in 2020. The development was scheduled to take the African nation a major LNG exporter to Europe and Asia, but it has halted in 2021 due to an Islamist insurgency in the region. And resistance is mounting against South Africa's National Treasury's proposal of a 20% national tax on online gambling. There is a widespread criticism of the tax, especially from licensed operators who say it would lead to the closure of businesses and ultimately job losses. Legal expert Garen Whiteman says that the proposal is constitutionally unacceptable.
Tax has got nothing to do with issues of responsible gambling. To the extent that tax is utilized for responsible gambling programs and utilized in an appropriate way for responsible gambling programs, then I suppose there is some sort of connection. But in tax and responsible gambling and the concern that's being expressed at the moment, across the media, in various other interest groups, that responsible gambling is a big issue at the moment and that taxation is a way to resolve it, I think is completely misleading and I think is wrong.
And on to this now. Artificial intelligence organization OpenAI CEO Sam Altman told employees he was declaring a code red to improve ChatGPT and is planning to delay other initiatives such as advertising, citing an internal memo. OpenAI has not publicly acknowledged it is working on selling ads, but it is testing different types of ads, including those related to online shopping. And look at your financial indicators. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 443. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 88. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 30. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 88. And look at your BRICS countries. In Brazil, $1 is trading at 5 real 34. Russia, it's 77 rubles 40. India, it's 89 rupees 54. China, it's 71 6. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands 9 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. And look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,216 and platinum at $1,645 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $63.19 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapala Mahape.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
8:46 Central African Time. Let's take you to South Africa for the next story. The country's power utility, Eskom, has reported a $1.4 billion profit after tax in the first 6 months to the end of September. Eskom released the unaudited interim financial results that show an increased earnings before depreciation tax to $4 billion. Now, this is the second consecutive year that Eskom has turned a profit after years of bailouts that have weighed in on the country's fiscus. Dimakatso Lushoro has the details.
The power utility says the 6 months interim results to end September 2025 demonstrate last year's profit was not a once-off. Eskom says its turnaround plan continues to strengthen the utility's performance, resulting in a sharp rise in profits and improved system reliability. Daphne Mokwena is Eskom's spokesperson.
These figures underscore both recovery and sustained improvement in EAF performance, reinforcing energy security and grid stability.
Eskom reported a 41% jump in profit before tax to $1.8 billion, while profit after tax rose to $1.4 billion. Revenue was up 4% to $11 billion. Its EBITDA, that is the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization, a profitability metric that measures the company's core operating performance, rose to $4 billion. Last year, Eskom saw a $934 million profit after tax, its full year profit in 8 years. Energy expert at Empower, Matthew Cruz, elaborates.
And that profit is in comparison to a loss that they made at the end of 2023 financial year at 31st March 2023 of 23.9 billion rand. So that's quite a significant difference. It's about a 40 billion rand difference in turnaround, going from a loss to a profit this year. And that was only over a 2-year span. So this is a significant financial improvement. And at the same time, it's also, while they were able to improve the energy availability factor, they've neglected to include two key pieces of information that I think were significant in assisting Eskom to turn around. The first was that they received 254 billion rand from the government as a bailout in the middle of 2023. It was to be spent over the following 3 years, which is a significant amount of money, 254 billion rand. They kind of omitted that they received basically half of financial year's revenue from the government for free. The second one was private industry's input and impact, installing about 6 gigawatts worth of electricity in terms of solar panels, in terms of electricity production over those same 2 years. And this significantly helped Eskom have some breathing room to do their maintenance.
Eskom's strong performance is aided by above-inflation tariffs and lower finance costs. Net finance costs fell by 14% due to lower interest rates and a steep reduction in recurring electricity blackouts. South Africa's energy regulator controversially granted Eskom a 12.7% increase in tariffs this year. The process of determining this increase was found to be unconstitutional by a court of law. Cruz says South African consumers will be beset with higher than inflation tariff increases in the coming year.
Currently, we're needing to choose between buying electricity or buying food. So there's always like this story, this context in this nation of electricity is too expensive, and Eskom saying we need more money, we need more money. And that's unfortunately still going to be the case going forward, as I project that there will once again, after these next 2 years of increases, also double-digit increases again. And they're going to say, oh, it's because we had all these operational expenditures. They won't mention necessarily there was diesel, but they just said we had a lot of money that was spent.
The power utility says improved plant availability meant load shedding was limited in the period under review. But financial challenges remain. Sales volume fell 3%. Municipal area debt has continued to climb, reaching $6.1 billion despite 71 municipalities joining the relief program.
The continued improvement in EAF has significantly reduced Eskom's reliance on costly diesel generation, allowing the company to focus more on cost-effective primary energy sources. Additionally, 6 generation units equivalent to 2,341 megawatts are currently on coal reserve due to excess capacity.
The newly appointed board that comes into office on the 1st of December will have to take forward the $18.7 billion capital investment over the next 5 years, mainly for maintaining generation and network infrastructure and expanding the transmission grid to support renewable energy integration. For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro.
All right, after Rise and Shine is on the move here on Channel Africa. Of course, you need to stay tuned for that because they always have interesting programming. What is happening today? Good morning, Palesa. To tell us is Palesa Tau.
Good morning.
I nearly said Mushat Tau.
Absolutely not.
Well, we could be sister and brother. Maybe not husband and wife.
Then
Good
maybe
save.
it's better say Benjamin Tau. Then
Oh, good,
much
there's also
better.
that.
Yes.
Surnames.
That's a whole show.
All right, we're having a conversation about family. Not Ben and I. We're not family. And you know, it can be quite complicated.
Yeah.
Sometimes so complicated that people become estranged with their families.
Yeah.
And today we're discussing whether if you're estranged with your family member, do you need to honor their dying wishes?
That's a tough one, hey?
Yeah, that's also quite interesting.
Yeah.
Something I don't think we think of.
And you know, these estrangements sometimes happen so far back you forget
why
you were
it happened
even
in the first
beefing.
place.
You know.
Do you have to honor the dying wishes of your family members who you're estranged with?
Do you know, I think you ought to, hey? I mean, there's something about death and its suspiciousness. And also for me personally, I don't want to take a chance at
What if their dying wish is something that can cause further division in the family? Because
that's
I think it
another
depends
story.
on what it is that they wanted.
That's a tricky one.
Quite complicated. We'll be delving into that in
Wow.
today's first hour. We're going to be speaking about investment in our money matters. Investing in stock, but not the kind that you're thinking about. Investing in livestock.
Oh,
Lovely.
wow.
Lovely. We should all get
That
into
sounds good on when you say it out loud. But of course, periodically we have things like swine fever, all those kinds of things.
The weather, the floods.
So it may sound fantastic, and I like to invest in things I can touch and feel, as opposed to things like cryptocurrency. But there's also a risk to it. But that is an interesting subject. You've got a very fascinating show today.
Of course we do.
So that's on the move coming up after the 9 o'clock news. Don't miss it.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
The Directorate of Priority Crimes Investigations, the Hawks in South Africa, is not ruling out the possibility of additional arrests in connection with the alleged recruitment of South Africans to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war. This follows the postponement of the case against five accused to next Monday for a formal bail application. SABC freelance presenter Nonkululeko Mantula, Tulani Masbuko, Xolani Ntuli, Spamandla Chabalala and Sfiso Mabena briefly appeared before the Kempton Park Magistrates Court in the country's province of Gauteng on Monday. Lerato Makola reports.
Inside the courtroom, proceedings were quick, with the state revealing that further investigations are still underway. The 4 men and 1 woman appeared.
The last time parent dominated Bafana, it was during us. Remember, we had when we won the AFCON, we had about 7 players. 7 good players in Bafana.
Without government approval, Hawks spokesperson Katlego Morale says any further charges against the 5 are part of their ongoing investigations.
With regards to the charges, that we will also be interrogating, and when we again convene, what is important is that for one to be able to go fight a war that is not with their own country, there is certain processes that need to be followed, and those were not followed.
Mukhale says it is unclear how the accused who are all from Gauteng were lured.
At this stage, it's too early in the investigation to amass as to who is involved or could be involved, but we are not ruling out a possibility that these are ordinary, normal South African citizens who are working amongst all of us.
The state prosecutor, Peter Erasmus, revealed that they may not oppose bail for the 5 accused.
It's the first appearance. At this stage, the state objects against the granting of bail, but I have discussed the issue with my learned colleague. We request that we postpone the matter until next week, Monday, for a possible bail application. There is a good possibility that the state will, after certain preliminary investigations regarding the granting of bail, that the state will not object to the granting of bail.
The court ruled that the group will remain in custody until their next appearance, where bail applications are expected to be heard. Lerato Makula, SABC News in Johannesburg.
All right, so it's time for us to take another look in history, and I'm going to take you back to December 1990. On December the 2nd, Niger held a landmark constitutional referendum. Nigerians voted for a new constitution to open the way for multi-party democracy, and that marked a major transition away from military rule. Something that did happen around the world, which was hailed at the time, and in terms of science perhaps was a major breakthrough, but not too many years later, a few years later actually, we would see the destructive effect of it. On this day in 1942, the world's first controlled nuclear chain reaction was achieved at the University of Chicago, marking the beginning of the atomic age. And that was 1942. World War II happened, and then of course within 5 years a nuclear bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, another one was dropped on Hiroshima, and that, I'm afraid, started the nuclear, what do they call this race between Russia and the US, and now we have these debates about who is allowed to have nuclear weapons, who isn't allowed to have nuclear weapons. America's busy telling the whole world you can't have, but it's got a whole arsenal. Israel has got nuclear weapons, which it denies, and South Africa, we shut down our nuclear armaments process.
North Korea made their own threats.
Well, I mean, so, and this all began on this day, 1942, in a laboratory in Chicago. Yeah, ne?
Yeah.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
That's how we come to the end of this Tuesday, the 2nd of December's edition of Rise and Shine. We'll be back tomorrow from 6 till 9 it will be. And I don't know if we can mention it now that our programming for December will change at some point where we'll be together with you guys from 6 till 8. Yeah, that starts on the 19th, so please don't be surprised and think we've left work early. But yeah, I'm Asanda Peter.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Are you doing your Christmas shopping early this year?
I've already done.
Really? It's all done.
I don't like shopping malls. I don't like crowded spaces. So I knew I need to just save in time. Everything was sorted in November for me.
Sheesh, I think I'm going to do it this weekend. I like the way you're organized. I'm going to learn a lot from you. Have an awesome day, everybody. The news is next with Onele Nsitsi, followed by the sports headlines with Musibudi Makura. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at your top stories, West African leaders press for Guinea-Bissau's coup officers to restore constitutional order, and the death toll in Indonesia floods continues to rise. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. West African leaders are pressing Guinea-Bissau's coup officers to restore constitutional order, urging them to allow the release of election results from the disputed November 23 presidential vote. Leaders from the ECOWAS bloc, led by Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio, held tense talks in Bissau yesterday with the officers who seized power last week. The visit marks ECOWAS' most direct attempt yet to reverse the military takeover in a country long troubled by political instability. Sierra Leone Foreign Minister Timothy Musa Kaba said ECOWAS is demanding the restoration of constitutional order and the logical conclusion of the electoral process. The bloc will decide the next steps, including possible sanctions at their December 14th summit. Furthermore, Nigeria's offered Guinea-Bissau opposition presidential candidate Fernando Diaz protection at its embassy in the capital, Bissau.